ready? Let me. I'm What's up, everybody? Welcome. Happy Thursday to each and every one of you. We are live here in Inglewood, California, with some powerhouse folks who are in the house to really have a dynamite conversation on items or discussion points that are needed for the Black community. And I'll tell you this is going to be a very special night. It's going to be a very long night for some of us, but short for most. However, with it, we wanted to really bring the power of conversation to the table, not just speaking about police reform or speaking about police brutality and things of that sort, but what are the areas that affect the Black community? It's not just police and community, but it's finance, it's education, it's community overall. These are all important elements that truly drive the Black community. It can either help to progress the Black community or help to squander, if you will, or slow the progression in the Black community. So we wanted to bring together some qualified folks, credible individuals here in the city of California who are doing phenomenal things. We wanted them to share their story, share their perspective, but most importantly, reiterate what steps are necessary to take immediately to progress the Black community. My name is Matthew Newman. I'm excited to be here tonight. I am a serial entrepreneur and community leader here in the city of Inglewood. And I'm truly excited tonight because we have some wonderful, wonderful panelists for Group One. Group One. It's going to be a long night for some, yes, but short for a few. Again, I said that. But we have some phenomenal panelists here, and I'll give some very brief introductions of each person sitting here in front of me, again, who are doing some great things here in the city of California. I'll start on my left, on the left of your screen as well. This is Monica Carter. Monica Carter really prides herself on being a private wealth advisor to the rich and also the middle class as well. Right. But most importantly, reiterating the significance of folks making a second stream of income. Yes. There's a quote that says that a wise man makes money more than one way. So if you will, in the comment section, if you're watching this right now, please throw some thumbs up for Monica Carter. Monica, welcome.
Thank
Welcome.
you so much, Matt.
Absolutely. We have Senior Officer Langston, who is in the house. He is a senior officer with the Los Angeles Unified School District Police. He's also vice president of the Black School Police Officers Coalition, which you guys are going to hear a lot about tonight from Officer Langston, but also from Officer Fenderson as well, who will most likely speak to a little bit in Group 2. But we're excited to have you here today. This is someone who I've grown close to because my wife actually established a relationship between he and I and found so much synergy on so many levels. It levels on Christianity and our beliefs, but also for police and community conversations in bridging that gap. So again, if you're in the comments right now, please drop some thumbs up for Senior Officer Langston, who's in the house. Awesome. And last but certainly not least, we have Detective Morris, who is in the house. Detective Morris, Sharonda Morris, who is in the house. Look, this is someone who Officer Langston actually introduced me to. She sent over a note and said, hey, look, I got to be on this panel. I said, we want you on this panel. She has 18 years in the game, y'all. 18 years in the game. This is, and she don't show it one bit. 18 years in the game. And of course, that's veteran status, of course. She's a detective with the Los Angeles Unified School District Police Department. She is also a proud member of the Divine Nine of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. So she's here. Gramblin's in the house. So again, if you are in the comments, y'all, we want you to for Detective Sharonda Morris. Welcome in. We're so excited, guys, again, for this conversation. And I got to tell you right now that this panel here, most folks say, well, why do you have someone who's a private wealth advisor and why do you have police sitting on the same panel? This is very tricky. We had some conversations backstage about this, but it's kind of challenging at times to combine the topics of finance and police if you aren't educated on how finance impacts the Black community.
Exactly.
So we're going to dig into that a little bit tonight. We want to share some perspectives, and what I encourage all of our panelists to do, also those who are streaming and watching, to comment, be engaged. We'll pull some conversations or questions that could be answered towards the latter part. But I want to start off with Senior Officer Langston. And everyone will start off with a little bit about their journey, etc. We want to make sure that our listeners and our viewers are in tune with who you are and what you do outside of my introduction. But Senior Officer Langston, I would really love for you to, especially as a Black man who's a police officer, we'll get to that question. But what was your journey? What has your journey been like as a police officer?
Well, you know what? My journey has been like a lot of young African-American men who grew up in inner city. I grew up in Compton during the late 80s. And during the late 80s, you know, we had the height of the war on drugs. We had the height of gang violence. So I saw a lot growing up. But thank God for my wonderful parents who really worked hard, provided me with a loving home, supported me. And really, my dad really invested a lot in me. That relationship is just so important, Matthew, the relationship between the father and the son. And I thank my dad for really pouring into me. And I played football, and I got a scholarship to play football at a small college in Minnesota. And I went to school in Minnesota. But let me just jump a little back before Minnesota. When I went to high school, I established a really good relationship with the school resource officer on my campus. And that's what inspired me to want to go into law enforcement. So after I went to college, played football, got out of college, graduated, I came back and I applied for the Los Angeles School Police Department because of my experience with that school resource officer. I knew that's what I wanted to do as a career if I didn't, you know, make it pro or play in the NFL. So 18 years later, I'm here. I really love my job. I love working with young people. I love mentoring young people and helping young people. It's been a blessing, Matthew, to be where I'm at right here today. It's been a real blessing.
That's incredible. That's incredible. We have hand claps from the panelists. And just so that you guys know, one thing, anytime that I host anything, especially virtual, I know I said throw some thumbs up, but we're going to throw some sevens in the comments as well. Sevens in the comments. And the reason why we throw sevens in the comments is really because 7 is a spiritual number of completion.
And
so we want to make sure that this conversation, we're completing the cycle tonight.
Yes.
Like this is a conversation that's going to really help to transform minds and hearts, not only amongst us as Blacks, but also our white folks, our Hispanic folks, if any community outside of ours, but everybody is important. And so, Senior Officer Langston, with your motivation from the SROs or the school resource officer, SROs, is sometimes what we refer to them in Texas as. The senior resource officers really are the eyes and the ears of the campus, right? They communicate back to you all if there's any challenges. Now, I know that I know personal stories from yours as well. My wife is a principal, so I know stories of what you guys have to report to. And I remember last year in the 2019 to 2020 school year, you guys reported to a shooting in Watts. Right? And so with that being said, the schools go on lockdown, etc. And officers show up, they have to assess the scene, make sure the scene is protected, etc. Now, oftentimes, here's a story. We got to bring in the Jacob Blake situation, right? To where you have officers who are reporting to a scene. From what we know so far, is that Jacob Blake was breaking up a fight. Right? From what we know so far. So he was breaking up a fight. As he went back to his car, which seemed to be an SUV, he was then gunned down, 7 shots in the back. He's now paralyzed. The question is, there's a report. That's on NPR. It's entitled "System for Reporting Police Killings: Unreliable Studies Find." And what the question is I'll read a little bit of excerpt that says,
"With you, and we want to see justice for Jacob Blake and for Michael Floyd. We do for everybody that's been impacted by police, lost their lives in these incidents involving policing." So the question. I believe that a lot of what we're seeing when you say that officers are maybe quick to go gunpoint or retrieve their weapon. I think a lot of what we're seeing or go hands on or retrieve their weapon. it has to do with this lack of confidence from a lot of the police officers, a lack of confidence in their abilities to be able to de-escalate these situations verbally. It's a lack of confidence there. So when you lack confidence, typically you resort to the hands-on approach quicker. You resort to maybe the gunpoint situation a lot quicker. And I think that because of this, there's a definite lack of training as far as it relates to de-escalation. And I believe that there's more de-escalation training that's definitely needed, because this lack of confidence, if you're confident in your training and your de-escalation training, then you will rely on that, and you will use that in these situations, and you will use that until it's a net necessity that you have to do something else, and it's a life-threatening situation or whatnot. But de-escalation is so important, and we need so much more de-escalation training. And furthermore, this is a big issue right here too. When we're talking about reform, we need a national standard as it relates to policing in this country. We all need to be receiving the same training, right? We all need to be conducting investigations and things the same way. We all need to be on the same page. We can't have these differences between department to department, state to state. We have to be on the same page. Training here in California is different than training in Wisconsin. Training here in California is different than where you come from, Matthew, in Texas, right? Some states the qualifications are different. You need a degree. Some states you just need a high school diploma. Some states require you to have a year and a half of basic police training. Some states require you to have 6 to 8 weeks of basic police training. So these differences are creating these inconsistencies. I believe a lot of these inconsistencies are what we see when police are dealing with people in these different situations in these different states.
So this is crazy, because what you're saying is that we don't have a national standard when it comes to police training, but we have national statistics that we lean on.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that that's bizarre.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah. I mean, even another report that's here shows that victims were majority white, 52%.
Yeah.
But disproportionately black at 32%. With a fatality rate 2.8 times higher among blacks than whites. Yeah. Here's the kicker. Most victims were reported to be armed, 83%.
Wow.
However, black victims were more likely to be unarmed at 14.8% than whites.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow.
So the confidence, my question, and this is a follow-up question, is the confidence of the officers relying on his training different when he approaches a white victim than when he approaches a black victim?
Yeah. Well, it's really hard to really pinpoint that and say, okay, from what we see, and say, okay, that is definitely he's approaching that situation different because of the race of this person or whatnot. It's hard sometimes to pinpoint that. But what I will say is that what we're seeing in the media and what we're seeing in the news, it seems like that there is a lot of these incidents that are happening with African Americans who are unarmed. And again, we don't like that. Nobody in police in the law enforcement profession likes what's happening and what's going on. And we all want to work to figure out how we can do things better. We want to do things better. We want things to be consistent across the board with everybody. And that's what we always we work to do is fight for that consistency across the board for everybody. That's why I think it's just so important. The training that's needed. It's a lot of training that's needed as far as implicit bias training. It's racial profiling training. Sometimes people are doing things and reacting a certain way, and they don't know they have these biases. They don't know that they view certain people or whatever a certain way. They don't know these things. So it's important to have this training so we can openly talk about race. That's another taboo in law enforcement, is that nobody likes to openly talk about race. And it's not just law enforcement, just in general, nobody likes to do that. But we have to open it up, and we got to talk about race within our departments, race within our families, race within our communities. We have to talk about it, because a lot of what's going on and what's happening is there's a racial aspect in it that needs to be talked about, and we need to discuss, and people need to get comfortable in talking about race, especially in law enforcement.
And so there's so much that most folks, and this is something with the Black School Police Officers Coalition that we need to touch base on during this segment.
Yes.
Is that there's so much covert language and covert actions that most folks, again, covert just simply, I'm not aware of what I'm doing. So they're just not aware. So that's a topic that we need to touch on. But I'm gonna pass the mic here to Detective Morris, because this is 18 years in the game.
Yes.
And so with 18 years in the game, I'm sure that you have seen
the
a
veteran.
lot of stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff. And so if you will, Detective, if you can simply share briefly a little bit about your journey, and I'm gonna go ahead and throw this question out there to Senior Officer Langston's point of training, is how can officers be held more accountable to their training? So share a little bit about who you are. Please dive into the background, and then please, if you will, answer that question of how police can be held more accountable to their trainings.
Well, I've been in law enforcement for 18 years. I've been a detective for going on 3 years now. I have worked various assignments, various areas. I've been a campus officer for middle school, high school. I've worked in the Valley. I've worked in East LA. I've worked in South Central. I've worked in the South End, the Harbor area. I'm a detective in our West Division now. So now I get some of that West Side going on. And
West Side.
Yeah, get some of the West Side action going on. And but you know, I'm very comfortable working with my people. I mean, I prefer it. You know, I've also been I was also in our training unit, and we had not had really a Black person in our training unit for 15 years. And so I got that opportunity to be in our training unit for almost 5 years, where I was the person who was responsible for ensuring that the entire department was in compliance with the California state standards, from the chief down to the officer level. And I was an officer. I wasn't a commander, lieutenant. I wasn't any of that. I was the officer, and I had to ensure that, hey, chief, you need to take this class. You're out of compliance, and I had to be able to kind of hold him accountable to say, hey, everybody has to be in compliance. So, my journey on this department, I'm very grateful. As Langston said, I'm very grateful. He has 18 years on too. We went to the academy together. So he's,
I did not know that.
No. So
he got 36 years just sitting right here in front of me.
So he's been dealing with me for a long time. Okay.
my little sister.
Yes, yeah. He has seen me go through a lot on this job. But I'm very, very grateful for it, because although I experienced hardships coming on, I was 5 feet, petite, Black, 100 pounds. And they looked at me like, what do you think you're going to do here? Who are you going to take into custody? But, I was raised by strong Black women and Black men. And I was raised that if you see anybody else doing it, you can do it too. And it doesn't matter, So I didn't allow anybody to tell me that I wasn't, capable of doing it. I went to, as you said, I went to Grambling State University, and
HBCU.
And very proud of that. And we're coming from Los Angeles, going to Grambling, it was definitely a difference, different culture, different ways of operating, And it wasn't, I'm a city girl, so I'm used to, getting places fast. I'm not used to dirt roads. But I loved it. I loved it. I made lifelong friends. I met my husband there. My family, my brother went there. His wife went there. My sister, she met her husband there. So I learned a lot of culture, and I learned really how to even be even more proud of us, it was a totally different experience for me going, because I did go to San Diego State University for a year, didn't do well because I was too busy partying with my homegirls, you know, up and down on the freeway.
18 years to combat that.
Yeah. So, you know, so I ended up going to Grambling, and it ended up being the best experience of my life. You know, I'm a part of our alumni association and everything. But I brought that up to say, when I went to San Diego State, I had a professor in my criminal justice class who told me that I could never be in law enforcement. He said, "You're too small." I wore glasses at the time. He said, "You wear glasses, you have to have perfect vision, all this stuff." And I looked at him. I said, "Well, what the heck does he know? You know, who's going to tell me I can't do something when I've only been raised to think that I could do things?" So it was just, I just couldn't imagine, what is he talking about? And, you know, I'm stubborn, I'm a little firecracker. So I'm like, well, I'm gonna show him something. And so when I ended up going to Grambling, I had nothing but support from my professors there. And that's what, you know, that's what we do. We uplift each other. Our community is just awesome. I mean, it ain't nothing like us, you know, everybody want to be like us. Ain't nothing like us. So, and then once I graduated, and 3 months after I graduated with my bachelor's degree, I started working for the police department. And it was difficult for me, but I never gave up. Went through the Sheriff's Academy, passed everything, never gave up there, went through all the training phases, worked all my assignments. And, you know, so when we talk about the training and the things like that needs to happen, it's very, very important. You know, the differences, like he touched on, from state to state and things like that, it has to be some continuity with the standards or with the training. It has to be that, because, you know, when the public we see these videos and we see what's happening, you know, to our people out there, we think, you know, well, why are they doing this, or why can't they do that? And it's hard for us to explain sometimes, because I'm thinking, I would never do something like that. I would never chase behind somebody with a gun in their back. Like, you know, especially you got partners around. What are you doing? You know, it's just the training, it's the mindset, you know? So I'm tired of it. You know, I'm really sick and tired of it, and sick and tired of being sick and tired, to be honest. Yes. You know, there's not a book long enough to list all the names back from Emmett Till to present. I mean, so many names that we don't even know. You know, that's the part that upsets me, is that we know what's going on with social media because we see it now. But even before that, we didn't see it. But just think of all the names of people, of Black people, who we don't even know that this has happened to. You know, they don't get recognized. They don't get justice. They don't get anything. You know, and my heart goes out to all of those families. I have a Black son. I have 2 children. You know, and I try to teach my son, you know, anything I could think of from an officer, of what I know and what I see with my experience and my training, and I try to impart that on him, you know, because I mean, I just can't imagine me being a cop and then something happens to my son, you know, and I didn't equip him with the tools to protect him. That would be irresponsible, you know.
Yeah, this is good. And this is something I want to encourage all of our viewers to understand right now, viewers, listeners, etc., is that what's incredibly important right now for us to understand and to see is that there are Black police officers, there are even white police officers. The young lady who introduced me to every substation in the city of Dallas is a white lieutenant of 30 plus years on the Dallas Police Department. And she introduced me to chiefs, assistant chiefs, etc. But one of the things that I've missioned to do is to establish relationships with police. And the only reason why I'm turning to the camera right now to tell you all this is that you have 2 police officers who happen to be a Black man and a Black woman who understand the value of community policing and bridging that gap. And so for everyone who is against the police in any shape, form, or fashion, this is what I challenge you to do before you preach against them, is identify a police officer who can advocate for you and with you. If they bounce against you, make your decision otherwise. But before you make any decision to speak against law enforcement, identify one or two who can help you pave the way to the necessary reform. And I'm not saying take money away. I'm saying reform of understanding what our communities need, but also understand what our police need in order to have a strategic relationship to bring change to our communities. So again, I missioned you to find one, find two who can advocate with you and for you. Monica, I got to go to this because you being a private wealth advisor, we started off by saying this, is that sometimes a conversation of finance and police, we don't know how to bridge that gap.
Right.
Please, I want you all, please, Monica, to share a little bit about yourself,
Okay.
your background. But here's what I really want to focus on, especially hearing Detective's story.
Right.
She has a Black son. Her son may be at home saying, is there hope?
Right.
So if Blacks are more susceptible, here's a question. If Blacks are more susceptible to the pandemic, that's
Right.
that's a challenge right now. Then we got a racial pandemic that
Right.
breeds all the way back from Emmett Till to present, as Detective said.
Yes.
The question that I have is that if we are affected or more susceptible
Mm-hmm.
to the financial strains of the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
to the strains based on statistics of police brutality,
Right.
is there hope?
Yes.
I want you to answer that, please. Is there hope? Then we're going to
Yes.
tie this all together and bring this segment to a close. But Monica, please.
Yes. Well, thank you, Matt. I just want to thank you for having me today. And first, I just want to, it's such a blessing and an honor to be around. We see so much negativity about police officers, and just being around Officer Langston and Detective Morris, it's just a blessing. I just want to thank you guys for your service, because we were talking before this, and I have law enforcement in my family, but I was saying I can never be a police officer. So, thank you for just protecting us. I don't take this stuff lightly, but just a little bit about myself. So I'm from St. Louis, the Show Me State. I was, so I still have those values, but I've been in California most of my life, but I still go to St. Louis. I started a career in HR. So I started my career at Disney. I have a background of HR executive. I've always been an entrepreneur. Like, you're a serial entrepreneur. At 19, I was always doing something. I had this thing called Monica's Creations. I would make all these Swarovski crystals and still do all those things today. But I've always been like an entrepreneur, always wanting to do better. Math is my favorite subject. That sounds crazy, right? Math and English is my
Yeah, that is
my
good.
mom would tell you. I love math. Always been a straight A student. Then I got into real estate. I bought my first condo when I was in my 20s. So I'm always, and I don't say this as a pretentious way, but I'm just a disciplined person as far as finances. And I just always wanted to do well for myself. And then later on in life, I had a 401k myself. And so one of my mentors, who is a multimillionaire in the 1%, and he was like, that's not what you should be doing. And I'm like, well, what should I be doing? I think I'm pretty smart, but oftentimes we follow the herd. We do kind of what everyone else is doing, and that's what I was doing. And so when he opened me up to this whole new society of wealth management and all these tax advantage strategies, I'm like, oh my God, they don't teach you this in high school. They teach you about sexual education more than they teach you about financial literacy. And so that everything I do, whether it's HR, whether it's real estate, you're helping someone buy commercial or residential, but everything I do is helping people. And so I gained a huge passion for financial services, because when you can sit down with someone, as we're talking about these low income areas or people who are not privy to financial literacy or how to manage their finances, and you can sit down with someone who's making $0 and just take their whole mindset to a whole new level. Wealth management is all about mindset. So you're asking me if there's hope. There's hope. And that's why I'm so passionate about it. It's servant leadership. When you're doing private wealth advisor, financial advisor, whatever you want to call yourself, it's all about servant leadership, because I'm helping people. I'm first working with your mind, because so many people that look like me say, oh, I can't do this. I can't. I'm like, I was talking to Detective Morris. I'm not going to say what we were talking about, but women empowerment is my platform, right? But she said something. I said, oh, no. Right, Detective? I said, no, we don't think like that. We can do, especially when you're a man or woman of God. That's the principle I live by. So let's start there. He said you can do all things through Christ that strengthens you. So let's just start there. And so if there's hope, yes, there's a lot of hope. If people will use their skill in this environment and its financial services to help the underserved, I'm always a believer that when you help people get what they need, you'll always get what you need. Yes. I don't never worry about, am I going to make money to do this? Man, it just comes because I'm serving. Yes. And so when I love going into schools before all this COVID and teaching young people, whether you're in grade school, whether you're in high school, it's nothing better to teach them how to manage their finances. Yes. It hurts me when I see a teenager walking with her stomach big, and that's because she doesn't understand, or he don't understand. When that baby comes, someone has to pay for that, not your parents.
Yes.
And so if we educate people, there is hope. We just have to spend more time, and time means sacrifice.
Yeah.
We're here tonight. I love it. I'm here. My husband, hey Joseph, you know, he's like, go ahead, do your thing.
Yeah.
I am passionate about this thing because we need to educate. And so that's where the hope comes from. We just, as if I can reach more people, it hurts me when I see, just recently, 3 weeks ago, I saw a 75-year-old working at UCLA. So anytime I see someone looking like me pushing a trash can, I'm like, what happened? Because I'm in that industry. So we had a conversation and they said, hey, you know what? I outlived my retirement resources. And that it just hurts my gut, and because somebody didn't get to that person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why is he working at 75 pushing a trash can? So that is my mission that I am serving.
Yes.
So there is hope.
Yes.
So I'm out in community. I do everything for my people.
Yeah.
I do everything for other people as well. And most of my clients don't look like me.
Yeah.
And so anytime I can meet with someone who looks like me to really just educate and change your mindset, because we get caught up and people tell us these things and we start to believe it, but we got to change the way we think about ourselves. Just because you were raised in a certain environment or you're poor doesn't mean you have to be poor. I know a lot of people who were poor before and now they're not poor anymore. So it just takes that person pulling you by the hand and saying, you can do this.
Yes.
And so that's where I teach them about financial everything. It's just amazing. I love what I do. I'm passionate about
Monica,
it.
this is you mentioned approaching a 75-year-old man pushing a trash can at USC, trying to identify what
Right.
happened, who fell short. Maybe
Yes.
it wasn't him. I think I gave you
Right.
the story. Maybe I did. I don't know if it was you or someone, but it was about my father got served because his father left when he passed away, still owed on his house.
Yeah, you were telling me
I
when
think
we
I
met before. Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
And so it was one of the things that you and also the president of the chamber here in Inglewood encouraged me is
Right.
to inform your dad.
Yes.
Educate your dad.
Yes.
You know, we can build that financial wealth.
You're right.
Because the crazy part, here's another statistic I'll read that fits this
Right.
category here. It says that meanwhile, social isolation, talking about the pandemic,
Right.
social isolation through policy discrimination.
Mhm.
Here it goes. This is how finances impact the Black community. It
Yes.
says, meanwhile, social isolation through policy discrimination has extracted significant wealth from Black families.
Mm.
According to the Federal Reserve's most recent numbers in 2016, white families had the highest median family wealth at $171,000. Now, before we
Wow.
say wow to this, listen, Black and Latinos or Hispanic families had 17.6 thousand
Yeah.
and 20.7 thousand respectively, making these households far more susceptible to pandemics
Yes.
of this scale.
Right. Mhm.
White families
That is
Right.
had the highest median
Big
family
discrepancy.
wealth of $171,000. Blacks and Latinos,
Mhm.
17.6 and 20.7 respectively.
Wow.
So I asked the question of Monica, I said, is there hope?
Mm-hmm.
And from what I'm hearing is that the hope lies in education,
Yes.
course.
And coaching.
being educated,
Of course.
Yes.
number one,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
shifting the mindset
Right.
to believe that we can
Of course.
Right.
do,
We
and we
do.
can have what everyone else has.
Yes.
I made it a
Yes.
mission. It's so crazy. I went to a store and we took back this very expensive watch that I got my wife. And the lady was like, looking like, are you sure?
Right.
And nonetheless, I ended up buying very expensive watch out of that store to
Mhm.
prove that I can.
Right.
Mm.
I have that. I do that sometimes. Just to like, you're giving me the eye, but I'm gonna show you.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I'm fortunate to have mentors who've
Right.
taught me. Not everything that Monica, she's taught me some. We haven't even touched the iceberg.
Yes.
What she can teach me.
Yes.
However, now that I'm blessed with more, there's more that I
Yes.
need to be doing.
Exactly.
Right. So
Right.
I want to be able to show people that yes, you can have,
Right.
but it takes some work.
Of
Yeah, it
course.
It
takes
just
some
doesn't
work.
come easy.
You have
Yes.
to plant those seeds.
Got to plant the
Got to
seeds.
plant the
Yes.
seeds.
Takes work.
Right.
This is a seed that we gotta
Yes.
Right.
cultivate
Um,
first.
Right. And
Come
also,
on.
Matthew, I
Yes.
was going to say also for young people, I've talked to a lot of young people, we can show them examples. You know, not just everybody can't play basketball. Everybody's not going to play football. Everybody can't be Kobe. You know, you just can't do that. But there are so many, there are a plethora of other things that you
Yeah.
can do. And so if you see someone that's in financial service. This is a whole secret society. Like people who look like me are very rare, few, far in between. And when I sit with some people, they're like, "Nigga, how did you know that? Where did you know that from? Well, what do you mean? Like I read, you know." And the problem is America doesn't read. We don't read. This stuff is in books. It's in magazines. I read every day. I read about a book every month. It's in books. And so we have to educate. And so I don't if I'm at the store at Whole Foods or wherever I'm at, and I'm talking to someone, I'm educating them. I'm sowing seed. And so I think, that's what we have to do, coach people and sow seed. And we have to serve. Many people are just looking for, oh, what can you do for me? No, when you serve, you will have whatever you need in your life. But you're on this earth, not just for yourself. You have to serve. I couldn't do that, but they can, right? So you serve where you're appointed to serve in.
Find your lane and
find your
ministry.
Lane. Yes.
Find your lane and find your ministry.
Yes. Yes. Your ministry. You're right.
There's a couple of follow-up questions that I want to ask as, again, we begin to bring this segment to a close.
Okay.
When we go back to Jacob Blake, we talk about hope, how finances truly impact the Black community. It comes with education. It comes with a shift in mindset. Is that the shift in mindset, as I turned to the camera a few moments ago, really explaining the importance of folks identifying officers who can advocate with and for them, is now we need to hear and see a shift in the narrative when it comes to a national standard of policing the community. Okay, so with that being said, we have Jacob Blake. We got killings happening. We got a white man who's a male who's 17 years old, shot some folks walking down, passing tanks. Nothing happens. We got antagonists who cops are throwing water out to him in the tank. We got all these types of things happening.
Right.
So we need to begin to have the conversations of why there can be hope when it comes to police and community.
Right.
Okay. I preface this question with what I just said because of this. When it comes to an OIS or an officer involved shooting, there's standards that are followed. Those standards are different across the board.
Yes.
Based on the information that we have, what hope can we give? And senior officer or detective, you guys can answer this, either one. What hope can we give the community, the Black community, that one, justice will be served, right? So can we identify what the steps are of investigating this? One, maybe that's yours. And then number two is, what can we expect? What is there hope in justice when it comes to the officer who popped 7 bullets in the back of Jacob Blake and have left him paralyzed?
Well, I'll say that, yes, there's hope. Thank God he's alive to tell his side of the story. Okay. So that's unlike a lot of the other stories, a lot of the other victims and murders that happened. They're not alive to tell what really happened. And we are only able to see the clips and the videos that are, exposed to us in social media and in the news. As far as the steps for officer involved shootings, they're always, in LA County specifically, it's not just left up to the internal agency to do their own investigation. That agency does their own investigation, but also the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, they have a team and a task force of senior investigator and officers that come to the scene. They have to be notified anytime within quickly 30 minutes or so that this is an OIS has happened. And they come out and they do an independent investigation. So like you said, in other places, they may not have that resource available to them, but here we do. So, and there's lots of investigations going on at one time. There's the criminal investigation that your officer involved shooting team internally with your department, they're conducting that. Then there is the DA's office, that independent investigation that they're overseeing what you're doing, not interfering with their investigation, but those findings should be pretty much in alignment, right? Because they're on scene with you, right? So the preservation of evidence and all of that stuff, the witness statements should pretty much the same, because you're doing double interviewing. Witnesses have been separated, pictures, video, everything like that. And then there's also another internal investigations with your professional standards unit or your internal affairs unit. And that's also looking at, was there any kind of misconduct on your part? Then there's also an use of force committee, which is comprised of people from all ranks, officer, detective, lieutenant, sergeant, all these different ranks together, just looking at the use of force. So there's a lot of different investigations going on at one time. Other agencies and, other areas may not have as complex, steps,
Other
that they could take.
states and stuff
Yeah,
like
in other
that. They may
states,
not have it.
they might have all of
Yeah,
that,
Maybe,
but
it may not be like that.
right.
It's kind of.
That's kind of, yeah, that's usually kind of how it goes. As far as being able, what we can expect, I would expect nothing short of a thorough and complete investigation, an unbiased investigation, and the truth and the facts. I mean, that's what I would expect.
Yeah.
I would expect nothing less, especially, and I'm just grateful that he is alive to tell his
and
story.
For his family,
Right?
for his kids and everything.
I'm alive.
Yes,
I'm glad. I'm
especially.
grateful.
Yeah.
I am very grateful, and we
Yeah.
may see something different because of that,
And we have as you were saying, also, you have the dynamic now of, the FBI overseeing. So on top of
Yes,
what
yeah.
she's saying,
Right.
something like this, the FBI comes in and they're overseeing and making sure that things are going the way that they're supposed to go and things are consistent and there's no destroying or
You're right.
messing up
Tampering with
the
the
tampering
evidence.
or with the evidence or
Yeah.
messing up anything involved in the case. So there's even an FBI component in that that's making sure things go accordingly.
Right.
And that's why these things take time.
Yeah.
These thorough investigations take time. And I know that people want to see they want to see things happen immediately.
Yeah.
But for things to be thorough, for things to be for things to line up and for things to be thorough, for things to be for you to get a clear picture exactly of what happened, for the facts and everything to get out, these investigations, they do take time. It's a process,
Right.
and she just explained that this lengthy process,
Right.
and you can't really cut that process down.
No.
Yeah.
It
to
has to run.
satisfy what people
Yeah.
want to hear. They want some. A thorough investigation takes time.
It takes time.
People recall things. You interview people more than one time to
Yeah.
see. There's a story, and the story may be off a little bit because you're interviewing in the moment, but the facts shouldn't change. But you will remember more details,
Yeah.
right? So the facts won't change.
Yeah.
And I tell my kids, the truth doesn't change. A lie always does. The truth stays the same. So when you recall things and when you witness trauma, a traumatic situation, and we all know any kind of psychologist, they could tell you, the effects on the brain and everything, the stress that your mind goes through.
PTSD.
Yeah, the PTSD and everything. You will be able to recall things as a victim, as a witness, just by having that time to really think, okay, I remember smelling it's like a fish fry place right here. Yeah. I remember smelling a fish fry. And then I remember, so all those things start coming back to you as you have time to recount and think about what happened. But the details and the facts won't change. So that's very important.
Good, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Really good. This is really good. This is the conversation needed
Yeah.
for the Black community.
But I want to say that.
Yes.
I want to say this, Matthew.
Yes.
We have Black School Police Officer Association. We have Association of Black Police Officers. We have the National
Organization
Organization.
of Black Law Enforcement
We
Executives,
have
NOBLE.
NAACP. We
Yeah,
have
you
these
have
things. Why?
yes, yeah.
Because we need to be in the mix.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
We have these organizations are created. We're not sitting around here socializing. We're not just sitting around, hey, a bunch of Black people, we just want to get together and, socialize and hang out. No, we're in action. We are the community. We have a career, but our community, we are the community. We're not just a part of the community. We are the community.
Yes.
And we have a job to do, but our community is our community. And that's something that I know that all of us that actually take, that we come out here every day and, we put ourselves in jeopardy. We don't just do it because, it looks like a cool job to do, or, I want to make a certain amount of money, because you're not going to make enough money for my children not to have a mother at the end of the day. I'm never going to make enough money for that,
That's true.
but I our people to be educated.
That's
like
right.
Monica said, I want them to know what their rights are. I want them to know what the police can and can't do. I want them to know how they should respond to things. I want them to know when they say, "Oh, they pulled me over, and it was two cars behind, that behind me, and I got pulled over." And I said, "Well, they probably was on their way to get some lunch, but they just happened to just stop there because something happened. It's not always what people think it is.
Yeah.
It's not always what people think it is. So if like us at the with Black School Police Officers Coalition and things like that, if the community, our community, can welcome and accept us and allow us,
Yes.
we're ready.
Yes.
We
Yeah.
are ready. We ready.
We
Allow us to be a part of this.
there's a need, and we're here. We want to meet that need as African Americans, and has police officers.
Yeah.
We're able to bridge the gap, and that's what we want to work at doing, because we can relate to both. We can lay our hands on both, on both sides of this. It's a complicated equation.
Yeah.
And African American police officers are going to have to step up into that gap and begin to bring both sides together. And we need to sit down at the table and have these discussions that we're having right now. And I know it's tough right now with what's going on to get both sides to come together, right? The community, the police departments to come together, these organizations that are actively protesting and things like that. I know it's hard right now, but we want to be in position so when that happens, that hey, we'll be at having a seat at that table discussing these things and crossing color lines right now. That's really important right now, and that's what we want to do. We want to be able to be in position to mediate these situations, and people look across the table and they see somebody that looks like them, and they're more inclined to talk to us, to want to get an understanding from our perspective, being a police officer. And then within our departments also, we're able to talk about our experiences to our coworkers that most of the time are not Black, and we tell them about our experiences of being like my experience of being an African American man, why African Americans feel the way that they feel, maybe about the police. Right. She's able to do the same thing, and then they get to understand, like, oh, you know what? I never looked at it like that. Education.
Education.
Yes.
I mean,
Education.
just like Monica, said, even in her profession, I've worked our backgrounds unit for applicants that are coming on. Your credit, that's a disqualifier.
Yes.
Yeah.
So finances tie into it. Your finances, and your credit is a disqualifier.
Yes.
If you have things in collections and you have not shown responsibility, that's an easy one. Don't give it to them. Don't. That's easy. Why would you give them that?
Yeah.
Let it be hard for them to deny you.
Yeah.
Don't give them something like that.
Yeah.
That's an easy one.
Yeah.
So, Monica, the question that I'll ask you is, in closing, what I hear from Senior Officer Langston, Detective Morris, is we talk about the what, the who, but it's always important to emphasize the how.
Yes.
And what I hear in the how is, or the what here, is that for next steps, practical next steps, is to really get in position, identify a space where they can come into to really help the community, right? Really help the community, to show the community that there is a different narrative than what they're seeing and hearing, right? But for you, Monica, what are some practical steps, 1, 2, 3, that it could be 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, or 1, but just practical steps that can be applied immediately for the Black community to progress? Prime example could be the credit piece. That's huge.
Yeah,
but what is a practical step, 2 or 3 steps that those in the Black community can take to progress?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. But for starters, you got to be honest with yourself. Even with COVID right now, people are broke. They don't have any money, but they're still charging. I was reading the other day, an article said that, online sales have gone up by 60-70%, and people are broke. They're maxing out their credit cards. So they're acting as if they have money. So you got to be honest with yourself. And with finances in our Black community, we don't like to be honest with ourselves. We like to look like we're rich, but we're not. And so be honest with yourself. And then 2, just really observe and look at your situation. Sit down with a financial advisor. Many people have not ever done that in their life. There are some that do this on a complimentary basis. Everyone does not charge you for the services. So really sit down. And what we do is a financial needs analysis. It's just like you go to a doctor tomorrow and they say, hey, we're going to take out your liver, Matthew. Well, I didn't even get an x-ray. So how do I really know what you need? So we need to look at your whole portfolio. So that's number 2, sit down with a financial advisor, no matter your age.
Right.
No matter your age. And then 3, execute and take action. At the end of the day, you're responsible for your own. We can only do so much. We can coach you, we can educate you, but you have to take action. So 1, really just you have to be honest with yourself and then take action and sit down. Don't be afraid of it. Many people are hiding. This is a conversation that we don't talk about. Like you don't talk about Detective Morris about your finances. That's something that we don't talk about. Hey,
I feel comfortable about that.
I'm gonna
either.
talk to you about mine. I'm gonna get myself together.
You don't feel comfortable, but we
Yeah.
have to provide a vulnerable space where people are. It's okay that you messed up. The most wealthiest people have made it and they fail, but people don't see that. They don't see that person as big today, but they failed. People fail. People fail, and it's okay to fail, but you have to get back up. And so I just love to coach that. It's nothing that makes me feel more prouder than to take that person who's at their lowest and then see them like, oh my God, that is just
That's
amazing.
awesome.
So 1,
That's
be honest with yourself. All right. Look at your situation head on. If you got bad credit, like, Detective Morris was saying, bad credit, you don't have any money, your credit cards are maxed out. There's companies that can consolidate your debt.
Yeah.
There's a plethora of information, but you have to be willing to search it, research it, and don't always think something is a scam.
Yeah, that's true.
Every time I'm like, look, I don't like jail. I've never been to jail, so I am not trying to do it. But everyone always they're not accustomed to someone giving them, providing them coaching and education. They always think, oh, what are you going to send me a bill for this? Are you going to, relax. Relax. There are people that want to help you. Right. So be honest with yourself. Sit down with a financial advisor. It doesn't have to be a financial advisor. Sit down with someone who's really astute in their finance. Start there if you don't know anyone. Google. Call. There's somebody that knows somebody.
My boy Google knows a lot.
Exactly. And then 3, just start. You can't tackle everything. If you got bad credit, you don't have any money. You can't do everything at once. You don't have an emergency fund. You should have at least 3 to 6 months of emergency fund. You don't have that. You have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Right.
I've been looking at my student loan for like years. Like, even though you just pay it and you just say, oh, it's not a big deal. That's the only debt I have besides mortgages. And then soon I'll be paying off $86,000 that I've just been very disciplined on for a year and 4 months. I'm like right there, but you have to just tackle things and I could have been paid it off. I'm like, I just paid this $500 a month. But then I thought, I'm not disciplined. Even that, I'm like, I need to pay off this student loan. I don't want to see that student loan anymore. Put myself through school, undergrad and graduate school. Yeah. But you can do it. And I'm not telling you something I read. I'm telling you something that I've done for myself. I've never had bad credit, but that doesn't mean I'm paying off my student loan. Yes. And I can show you how to do that. Yeah. And so it's just a matter of just being vulnerable and just accepting where you're at in your life.
Monica, please tell the folks, since we're talking about financial wealth, etc.
Yes.
How can they find you? Whether that's social or whether that's an email address, how can they find you?
You can email me at mcarterpwa@gmail.com, or I'm on social media, Instagram. So Monica Carter or Monica Carter SARS. You can look me up there. Just send me an email. My website is www.dgfinancialpartners.com/Monica Carter. So yeah, you can find me.
Boom. There y'all have it. So right now, no excuse not to get those items in alignment with everything that we're doing, mindset, education, etc.
Right.
Guys, are there any last words before we close? Senior Officer Langston, Detective.
God bless everybody. Take care of each other.
Yes.
Look out for one another, and just be good to yourself.
Yeah. Be good to yourself.
Be good.
And each other. What was that on? I can't remember. That was good. Senior Officer Langston.
It's a tough time for everybody right now. Not only do we have the situation going on with policing here in United States, we got the pandemic. We have the hurricanes. So let's just make sure that I'm a man of faith. And faith tells us that people in faith, they operate and they act in faith. So all of my people in faith, and I'm gonna give a shout out to my church. I'm a minister at 3CLA's ministries in Long Beach.
Okay.
And I want to give a shout out because we got some praying people who are praying
Yes,
all of
yes,
us
yes.
through this situation. And I just encourage the people of faith and to really pray right now. We need a lot
Oh,
of prayer
gosh, yes,
over
yes.
these things that are happening and going on, because we want to see positive change, and we want to see the situation with this pandemic. We want to see again us be able to come out of this pandemic, people healed, and a vaccine and everything. And we want to make sure we pray for, again, the people in New Orleans who are experiencing this situation with both of these hurricanes. So much prayer is needed right now.
Yes,
So
it is.
people, please pray. Churches, pray.
Yes.
Make your requests known, please.
Yeah.
Yes.
Woo.
Yes.
Yeah.
Preaching, minister.
Look,
Yes.
definitely
I know.
preach
I'm
it.
have to get a podium.
Y'all,
Man.
it's a few
Yeah.
of us in here, and the few of us in here, I'll in scripture where there's two or more.
Yes.
He says he'll be right there in the midst. I don't want to take y'all to church. All I want to say to you all is this is just group number one, y'all. Just
Yes.
group number one. We have Monica Carter, Senior Officer Langston, and Detective Morris, who have really just spilled out some information that is going to be very difficult to absorb, right? But it takes us, first you got to listen,
Yes.
then move into it. Because sometimes the mindset itself, the mind before it shifts, makes it difficult to absorb.
Mhm.
But this is information that we need to figure out a way to absorb and to internalize so that we can make the changes that are necessary in the Black community. Y'all, we're there.
Yeah.
We're right there. But if we
Yes.
grow stagnant, if we continue to listen to the naysayers, if we
Yes.
continue to believe that there is no hope when it comes to police and community, if we continue to hear the naysayers say there is no hope when it comes to financial literacy in the Black community, if we continue to listen to the naysayers that say that there is no hope overall, we will sit on a railroad track and we will get run over.
Yeah.
Get yourself up, identify police officers, law enforcement, any person who you think opposes you. Find one that advocates for you, and I guarantee you your life will change. Find a financial coach, find a mentor, and I guarantee you your life will change. Y'all, the best is yet to come. This is group number one, and I can't wait to see you for group number two.
Can I say
Stay tuned.
one more thing? I could not be in Inglewood without giving big ups to Faithful Central. Now that's my church now. Bishop Omer and my First Lady Tagada. Just want to say, give a shout out. We have online church every Sunday, 7, 9:30, and 11:45. Just like, Officer Langston said, you got to give that up because
Got
that's
to.
where people get.
Give honor.
Got to shout out my
Shout out the church.
Shout out to Glory Christian Fellowship in
Yeah.
the city of Carson, Pastor Alta Trimble.
Okay.
All right.
Excellent. Thank you all very much for shouting out the church. You guys stay tuned. Group number two will come up in approximately 5 minutes. So hold your seat. You don't want to miss this. I'll go ahead and set it up for you all. If you guys watch Netflix, All American Preach, Kareem coming up in group number two. We have Damon Hawkins, our criminal and civil litigation attorney, Ludlow Creary, who will also be there, as well as the one and only Officer Travis Fenderson is on deck. So keep your seats. Stay tuned. We'll see you in approximately 5 minutes.
Welcome to All In Co-working of Inglewood, the newest collaborative workspace in Los Angeles. Let's check it out. Collaborative workspace in Los Angeles. Let's check it out. Welcome to All In Co-working of Inglewood, the newest collaborative workspace in Los Angeles. Let's check it out.
All righty, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Welcome. As I said just a few moments ago, we had a very powerful number one, just talking about finance and police and some of the challenges that are currently plaguing not only our community, but our nation right now when it comes to police brutality. But something that most folks aren't aware of is how finance ties into community. So we talked a little bit about that. But I'm really excited now to go into the next segment. As I told y'all, this is going to be long for some of us, meaning me tonight. A lot of talking, but this is a conversation that's needed. We didn't want to break this up into segments and do 3 different nights. We wanted to have this conversation in one night so that you get the information you need, digest it, and figure out what steps you can take to help progress the Black community. So without further ado, the men that I have. This is a powerful panel of all Black men sitting behind me in this seat or to the side of me. But we have some phenomenal people who do some incredible things here in the city of LA and across the nation. And the first gentleman that you will see directly to my left is Mr. Ludlow Creary II, who's a criminal and civil litigation attorney or litigator. He's also a part of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. We had Deltas here in the room on the last segment, but we're happy to have the Alphas here in the room tonight. Phenomenal things in the community. I've seen him speak on another panel with the church that Officer Langston shouted out, 3CLA, before, speaking about really how law ties into the Black community and how we can truly leverage it if we're educated on it. All right, so we want to welcome again. Drop the thumbs up in the comment for Mr. Ludlow Creary II. Welcome in, sir. Welcome in.
Thank you, Matthew.
Absolutely. The next gentleman that I'm going to introduce is a gentleman that I've come to know over the past, I believe, year and a half, nearly 2 years. We met on a football field track at my wife's previous high school. And this is someone who has a heart for the children and believes that it starts there. That's where community starts. And so we're going to ask him some questions tonight that pertain to what his vision is for the youth. But this is he's a police officer for the Los Angeles Unified School District. But more importantly, and I'll guarantee that he'll say the same, more importantly, he's the founder and executive director of the STEP Foundation. And he teaches kids not only how to play basketball, but the lessons that are found in basketball. A very down-to-earth gentleman who is very tuned into the community and knows what it takes to help elevate our community, the Black community. Without further ado, y'all need to drop some sevens and thumbs in the chat and give it up for Officer Travis Fenderson.
Matthew, gonna be running for
Yes,
president.
it is due your name. The gentleman who is sitting here in the denim, in the blue. I don't know if you can sit on camera yet, but this gentleman I've been knowing for at least 6, 7, 8 years or so. Yeah. And anytime that I introduce him to anybody or he introduces me to people, I always come back and edify him and say this is a gentleman, no matter what his success has been, he has remained the same. He's a modest, humble philanthropist, an actor, entrepreneur, all of that great stuff. You guys probably know him as Preach from Netflix's All-American. Yep, Netflix's All-American. Preach is in the house. Kareem Grimes. Welcome, sir. Welcome.
Brother. Pleasure to be here.
And last but certainly not least, I have a gentleman who behind me who I've come to know probably over the last 3 or 4 months now. And here's the good news about this gentleman. I met him serving. And we talked about servant leadership in group 1 for Monica, but this is someone who is fond of serving others. I'll tell him a secret. He doesn't know this, but I actually Googled him a couple days ago and I saw a post from his wife, and his wife had done a blog, and she says what she loves most about Damon is his heart. And I'll tell you this is a gentleman who leads some elements of the Western region chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Again, we have the Alphas in the room tonight. But he's at the forefront of a massive food distribution that touches the city of Inglewood every single month. And so I've seen him lead. I've seen him serve. I advocate for this gentleman. And so I had to bring him for this panel to discuss small business and entrepreneurship. He's a real estate investor, the whole nine. Those are some great introductions for the great men who are behind me. The gentleman who I just introduced is none other than Mr. Damon Hawkins. Welcome, Mr. Damon.
Thank you.
Guys, this is going to be great. And I got to tell you that I'm honored to not only be sitting here with you all, but really honored to dig into the brains of each of you to understand what it means to touch the Black community in law, what it means to touch the community in the community. We're going to really touch on this tonight. What part does Hollywood have in all of this, right? We've been seeing a lot. The young lady who plays tennis just wrote something very powerful on her Twitter. We've been seeing a lot. But then small business and entrepreneurs, right? What role does small business have on helping to progress the community? These are topics that we need to engage in and really take a deep dive in. Don't sugarcoat it, to help our listeners and our audience understand how they can drive the progression in the community. And I'm going to start off with Kareem. And I'm just going to simply ask you, sir, to please share your journey as an actor and as a philanthropist and what that means to you.
I've been in the business since 1988. I was blessed My first film was Boys in the Hood, and then from that point on, really just started to go and got focused. And it's definitely been up and down, but through just staying positive and focus and just chipping away at it, things have been good. I've been working consistently. So definitely blessed in that area. And I think just for me growing up, my mom has always instilled in me to give back. And when when you have it, definitely give back those people that are out there that are less fortunate, because I'm blessed. I'm able to go home, take a shower, hot water, food on the table, those people that don't have those simple things to be able to give back. So I've used my career and my platform to give back to those less fortunate. But through that, as we were talking, there were some ups and downs as far as image and narrative of when I started off just going out for the thug roles and things of that nature. And Hollywood has for a long time had narratives of African American men and women in a negative light. And I want to say probably within the past few 4 or 5 years, we're starting to see a change with Ava DuVernay, Lena Waithe, directors. We have so many. I'm trying to think of one who won an Oscar for what is it? Moonlight.
That one.
It'll come to me. It'll come to me. It'll come. Barry Jenkins. But you have individuals like that who are now changing that narrative and showing our stories. And I think that we're headed in a positive direction. You have shows like Insecure with Issa Rae, showing once again young black entrepreneurs, but just young black males and females who are the opposite of what we usually see in Hollywood. So once again, it's just we're definitely taking steps, and we are creating more paths, and I think as long as we support that. Even the show that I'm on, All American, based on a true story, Spencer Paysinger, it's rooted in what's going on right now in today's society. So people can be able to connect with it. It shows good and bad in Beverly Hills, and it shows good and bad in Crenshaw. So I think that's what makes the show so good. So, like I said, I feel we are headed in the right direction. It's definitely going to take some time because those who are at the top definitely, kind of make those green light decisions, So, but we have, Charles King, who is with Macro. They're doing films right now, so they are putting out images of African American people in a good way. I mean, you got Queen and Slim, So you have Nate Parker with Birth of a Nation. We have so many artists and just talented people out there who are starting to change the narrative. And like I said, I think we're headed in a positive way. So, especially we got social media with YouTube, and you got everybody now who can pick up a camera and tell a story.
That's right.
So
this is good because one of the things I was going to actually reference here is the New York Times has an article that's entitled "Hollywood Separate and Unequal." But what it really dives into is some of the mentions that you just made is Ava DuVernay's documentary, The 13th.
Yeah.
Nate Parker's The Birth of a Nation, or Barry Jenkins' Moonlight, or even Denzel Washington's Fences.
Yeah.
I remember I was on an airplane watching that when it first dropped.
Absolutely.
And it blew my mind.
Yeah.
Like they almost kicked me out the plane in the air.
Yeah.
Because that's how much it blew my mind. But it gives us a real solid view inside what we experience, right? The detective on the last panel just said that, look, we can go back to Emmett Till, probably even before that, to current, right? So these films are really depicting what we experience as a Black community.
Yeah.
And here's a question is can Hollywood do more though? Can Hollywood do more
Absolutely.
to shed light on the effects that we're feeling in the Black community?
Absolutely. And I think it starts with, you know, Michael B. Jordan has his production company, and he's talking about inclusion, you know, including women and women of color to be a part of his productions, period. So, yeah, I think Hollywood can do a lot better. And I think it starts from the top. You know, you have kind of like that old thinking you know, they used to say, oh, well, black films don't make money overseas. Well, that's a lie. I mean, we all saw Black Panther shatter records. You know what I'm saying? So that myth is dispelled. You know, like people don't watch enough television. Well, no, you got Insecure. You have all these other shows. You have The Chi. You have all these other shows that, you know, have a predominantly African-American cast that are getting, you know, 2 and 3 and 4 or 5 seasons. You got Power, 50 Cent, you know, probably one of the highest rated shows on Stars, you know, so you can't tell me that black people don't watch TV. These shows are popular and they connect with people, you know, so yeah, Hollywood can do better. I don't think it's just, you know, with the whole Black Lives Matter, they're saying, oh, well, we support Black Lives Matter. It has to go beyond that. You know, let's start making changes and really give these writers and directors these opportunities and not just let 1 or 2 come in and direct the film and say, oh, see, we've done our job. No, there's a host of African-American directors, a young brother by the name of Cal Maddock who lives in the community. You know, he's an amazing director. He directed the Entrepreneur video with Jay-Z and Pharrell, but he also did Lil Nas X. You know, so these are young, up-and-coming directors and creatives who just need the opportunity to be able to get that feature film. You know, so yeah, Hollywood can definitely do more, but I think it all takes a collective. You know, like I said, with social media, everybody can get on Twitter and literally tweet out a studio and really get their attention, you know? So I think if everybody does that collectively, you know, we can start making changes and just keep doing what we're doing. Support those films that come out, support those TV shows that come out. When they have higher ratings, the studio can't help but to say, you know what? Hey, we got to put more money in this. We got to give them more seasons because people are watching, period.
So there's a lot that I hear is that, and it's a question that I have in my brain that I'll get to probably towards the end because I want to save it because I really believe that you can speak on it eloquently. So I want to save it. But what I'm hearing is that actors and actresses, those in Hollywood, have a responsibility to do great things, right? Mm-hmm. So that there is no reason not to highlight it. Right. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm putting out a good film that's getting the views, then Hollywood themselves have no choice but to shed light on it. Yeah. To magnify it, to amplify it so that voice is out. Yeah. Right. And so with this is that we also, because there's a lot of folks who can nestle or settle into some type of frustration, right? They can settle into like, oh, Hollywood doesn't pay me no mind. I never get on Netflix. I submitted my thing to New York Film Festival or to the Sundance Film Festival time and time again, but I never get picked. And they settle in frustration and inactivity that it halts them from doing anything progressive, right? Absolutely. And so we have a responsibility, meaning blacks in entertainment, in Hollywood have an opportunity and a responsibility to do great things so that they have no choice but to highlight it. So there's some frustration there. And this I want to tie into to Officer Fenderson, or I'm gonna just call you Travis tonight. As you know, even in text message, I'm like OFC Fenderson. He know that. I never say no Fenderson. Never. So
I always take time to respond.
So it's so good to have you here because I know where your heart is. And your heart is community. And in that, the community, there's a lot of frustration. You know, we're sitting in Inglewood, California right now. There's a lot of frustration in our community around a lot of different things. So it's good to understand where that frustration comes from. So if you will, Travis, if you will, please share a little bit about yourself to the folks watching and listening. And then if you will, what do you think is at the core? This is a question. What do you think is at the core of the community's frustration when it comes to fighting systemic racism?
I'm glad you asked. Once upon a time, I was a school teacher. I taught life skills and health. Not far from where we are now, I was at Washington High School. Prior to that, I was at Locke High School. I buried 7 kids in one school year, 7 funerals of teenagers. I think the youngest was 13. He was a cousin of one of my ball players. I was a basketball coach at Locke. Prior to that, I worked in various communities, various settings, having to do with kids with challenges, from mental health. You know, I worked in a school that was, as a teacher, I had students from the Department of Mental Health, probation, Children and Family Services. 60-some-odd% of those kids were self-mutilators. They had tried to commit suicide. So I say this to say, my background is not necessarily law enforcement. My background is education. I got into school policing because some of the boys in my life skills class at Washington High asked me to. Fenderson, why don't you go become a cop so you can teach them how to deal with us? Whew. That's heavy, coming from 14-year-old black boys in the city. So fast forward, here we are. And I said, you know, that if the opportunity presented itself again, I would have to do more than just be that guy in the classroom. Because I got to a point, I felt like when the kid tells you he feels safer in your class than he does at home, and you got me choked up in here. I hate to do this live because people are going to be blowing up my phone. They're not going to be saying officer. They're going to be saying Travis.
We saw you crying on
Yeah,
Facebook.
on TV. What's wrong with you? But I say that because it's tough. It's tough to go to funerals all the time and hug parents, and it's tough. You know, you get to be as a coach, you get to relate to your kids in a different aspect. You know, as a teacher, they have you for 40 minutes, 50 minutes a day, you know, and you can do what you can do. As their parent, of course, a lot of things that you try to instill in them as a teacher or a coach, when they go home, unless that message is consistent, everything's washed away or wiped away if the parent is not on the same page. We start the STEP Foundation because now I get the boys and girls as much as I need to. I have kids that spend the weekend at my house. It sounds crazy, but a lot of kids have brand new packs of underwear, toothbrushes, and at the house because these are things that are necessary. So I feel an obligation to do more for kids. I got into school policing because I still wanted to be in schools. I still wanted to be around kids. And I wanted to provide more safety than just the 40 or 50 minutes I had with them. So now I can go to shoot. I'm responsible for the safety of kids in probably 50 schools. So I'm walking campuses. I'm talking to kids on a daily basis. We're doing our thing, you know, prior to COVID, but we're doing our thing. You know, I'm plucking this kid and that kid and that. I tell the principals at elementary schools, counselors at elementary schools, give me your tallest kid, because I like ball players. We can relate. Give me the kid that causes you the most trouble, and give me the kid that you think just needs guidance. And give me 3 weeks. He'll be a different guy. Wow. Same with girls. You know, we haven't done as much with girls as we have in the past recently, but we want to. We want to do a whole lot more simply because there's a need. You know, so, you know, the second part of your question, and you guys got me in here looking crazy. The second part of your question, the frustration comes from, like he said, opportunity. The opportunity's not there. You know, in the Los Angeles area, I was talking to somebody the other day. There are 3 YMCAs and 1 Boys and Girls Club. What do we have, 13 million people in LA? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And if you start looking on the map, these kids can't get to these places. So what are they supposed to do? Especially during the shutdown. What are they supposed to do? You know, recently, some people may have caught the news. A kid, Samaje Miller, they buried him. He played for us at one time. Kid was 14 years old, 6'7". You think the future wasn't bright? But these are the things I'm talking about. The opportunities are just not there. So like he said, we leverage law enforcement. I got platforms that a lot of people don't have. I walk in a room, any room I want to walk into, but I'm the same dude. So as soon as I come in the doors, I got everybody's attention. Now the question is, what's the message going to be? Same message I'm giving you now. I'm just wearing a badge. And I'm prepared to do what we need to do to make sure you're safe. So that's where we are.
We got a lot of frustration, and the frustration that is so there's a lot of different frustration with the lack of opportunities. It's a lack of opportunities when it comes to understanding what our rights are. There's a frustration when it comes to the lack of opportunities and resources for understanding what's our play in the community, right? Where we live in a community that doesn't support us, that doesn't hold us up, that doesn't hold us accountable, except unless they got us pushed up against a police car or whatnot, right? We have a frustration when it comes to the lack of opportunity, when it comes to entrances and play in Hollywood. It takes some time to get there, etc. They don't recognize talent as early, etc. Frustration in small business and entrepreneurship as well. It's like when it comes to loans, etc., then we don't get them as quick, or we don't get as much as the others across the railroad, like we would say in Texas, right? So there's a lot of frustration there. And I want to take our next question, if we can, please, to Mr. Damon Hawkins. And the reason I want to take this question to you is, of course, tell us about who you are in your journey as an entrepreneur, but also some setbacks, right? We talk about frustrations when it comes to lack of opportunity, but what are some of those setbacks that you experience as a Black entrepreneur? Please.
Well, for me, my journey as an entrepreneur, it started at a very young age. I didn't realize it at the time, but it came out of necessity. My parents got divorced at a very young age. I was 5 years old, and they were both financially challenged. And as a result of that, you know, out of necessity comes the mother of invention, right? That's what they say. And so, you know, I was that kid that was in front of the grocery store selling the candies, you know, and at a very young age, I learned how to make a sale and how to close a deal. So it became like this new, I should say, personal algorithm for me, is how many deals can I close? And so as I got older, fast forward to being older, you know, I was able to establish myself and get in college. But after my first year out of college, I bought my first property my first year, and I held that property for roughly 18 months. I sold it, and I was able to make enough profit to buy 2 properties. So not only was I like a homeowner, but now I was a homeowner who had income, and I was getting the tax breaks at the same time. I'm like, hey, wait a minute, I'm a real estate investor. Let's keep doing this. So, you know, and what I learned early on is that, you know, some of the setbacks that I feel that I had was fear, doubt, lack of resources, and then, you know, also just my associations. So I think those are some of the greatest setbacks that I believe most African-American young men have, just coming out the gate, no matter what your background is or what your family situation was. But for me, that's what it was for me. And so I believe the thing that I focused on was to, you know, I started reading books. You know, I said, okay, let me, you know, develop my relationship with God, and let me start reading books, and let me start focusing on who I hang out with. Because I read this book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. That's a very, very famous book. And he says in that book that if you want to know who you are, look at the 6 people you hang around. And if you can look at their income and divide it by 6, that's probably what your income is going to be. And same thing with your social status, and it goes on and on. So I started to look at my associations, and, you know, started to build on those resources. You know, better associations, better resources, right? And so that's, I feel like those are some of my setbacks, and that was how I was able to overcome some of the setbacks that I've had.
That's good. And for somebody out there, somebody needs to hear that message, because when entrepreneurship's not easy. I never forget, somebody told me, he's like, oh man, you're doing this, you're doing that. You can probably do whatever you want to do. Now you can probably go to the beach more. And I'm like, no, you go to the beach less, right? You go to the beach less because you're so in tuned or engulfed or immersed into what your craft is, right? Mm-hmm. But what happens is, if you have the wrong network is going to say, let's go to the beach. But the right network is going to say, no, let's grind, right? So we spend more time grinding, we can spend more time at the beach. The more money you have, the more things you can do, the more people you can bless, right? And that's what most folks need to hear, is that there are things that entrepreneurs can do to truly set ourselves free if we put in the work first. Don't start a business and start buying stuff off your first check. Take the profit and go buy more to make more money, and then buy the things, right? So that's a message for somebody tonight in this category, is that the frustration may be set in those setbacks, but let the setback ultimately turn into a comeback, right? Let the setback eventually turn into a comeback.
That's correct.
So there's things that we got to do. There's actions that we have to take. We're going to get to that a little bit more in each of your respective fields here, but I got to go to Mr. Lutlow here. And this is the reason why, is because I want to set this up in two parts. We have so much that's going on when we talk about the lack of frustration and opportunity, or the lack of the frustration that is birthed from the lack of opportunity. Frustration that's birthed from the lack of opportunity is so prevalent now, because so many people, this is what's crazy, is that so many people think that these racial inequities are just coming alive, right? It's like they're in their infancy. No, they've been around, right? People have been making demands. Most folks look at MLK as though he was the only one preaching from the mountaintop. But MLK had Malcolm X, although most folks nonviolence, whatever, or by any means necessary. MLK also had Rosa Parks, but there was another young lady who sat in the front of the bus before Rosa Parks sat in front of the bus. So we've been at this. We've been making demands on people for so many years, but so many people haven't understood. They haven't paid attention to the demands that we've been placing on people. So now everybody is making a ruckus, per se, like my mom and my dad would say. And now they want to pay attention, right? So the frustration is from the lack of opportunity, but it's also because people simply are not listening to the frustrations that the Black community is so clearly articulating, right? So Doc Rivers made this statement. Doc Rivers, we know the Bucks, we know, I believe there was another team that's boycotting playing right now, but Doc Rivers, who was so crazy, he happened to graduate from the same school, maybe not the same year, same school as my wife, Proviso East in Chicago. But he said something the other day. He says that we have to demand better. We have to demand more. So the question I want to ask you, Mr. Lutlow, is, with this, I want you to tell them about yourself as well, but please answer this question. Is, from your experience, do you believe that based off of what we've been demanding, do you think that there's been changes? If so, what have those changes been?
Well, that's a great question. What I think is, we have not, I agree with Doc Rivers. We need to demand more and we need to demand better. What I see, let me just start with who I am and my background. I'm a native of LA, straight up native of LA. I was born in St. Francis Hospital in Linwood. We lived in View Park at 4962 Orinda Avenue when I was born. Moved out of the community. Ended up back in the community right around the time I started college at UCLA on 36 and Denker in the mid 80s. So if anybody's watched the series Snowfall, then you know what the mid 80s in LA in the hood were like. All right. And I lived through it and I saw it. I became a lawyer, I wanted to become a lawyer since I was 12 years old. And that's because my parents split up and I saw my father had these lawyers and they were doing a number on my mother, and I felt my mother was getting the short end of the stick and she was getting the short end of the stick. So we, her 4 children, were getting the short end of the stick. And what I took from that experience, because she would take me to court with her, is that lawyers have power. And I wanted to gain that power so I could protect my family and protect my mother. And that was what gave me the inspiration and the drive to become a lawyer. So I've always had, just like these brothers have mentioned, I've always had a desire to be of service, and I felt that being an attorney would be a way for me to be of service to people who couldn't speak for themselves, who were victimized, and who were bullied. So that's my background, and that's what drove me then, and that's what drives me now. I hate bullies. So, yes, I think that what we as a community need to do is we need to really focus on a platform, a strong platform that we can take to whoever the elected officials are, whether they're local elected officials, whether they're state elected officials, or whether they're national elected officials. And we need to take that platform to them, and we need to hold it to them, because the reality of it is everybody knows, especially right now, everybody knows the power of the Black vote. Everybody knows the power of the Black vote today. Mr. Biden is the nominee today because of the Black vote. He owes us. And he picked a Black woman because he knew he owed us. But that's not enough. We don't just want a Black person sitting in the position. We don't just want them wearing kente cloth, right after the social unrest to show we want real change. But we have to organize, we have to make a show of strength, and we have to show these politicians that we are going to hold you accountable. We've given you our vote. This is what we want in return for it. Every other community does that. They don't just give their vote. Every other community, we talk about the Jewish community, they give their money and they expect something in return for it. We give our vote and we don't really have a unified voice on what we're asking for. And then we don't have, even if we did have a unified voice in what voice in what we're asking for, we don't tend to have any means of enforcing it. And that happens in Hollywood. That happens in law enforcement. I talk to Black police officers all the time who, they're not, their voice isn't really heard in the department, LAPD and these other departments. We as small business people, we have to struggle. We have to struggle against a lack of financing. We have to struggle against sometimes our own community not believing in the value of what we have to offer, and not supporting our businesses, and then so we have a lot of things that we need to work on as a community to come together, unify, because it's all about power. At the end of the day, it's about power, and Black people have power, and the LeBron James and the Lakers and these brothers in the NBA are showing that power right now. They're showing that power. You're going to see that in the NFL. We are going to express our power. And I think right now there is a difference. I think, number one, they are listening because they are afraid that the environments they live in are at risk. They saw the unrest, they saw the targets going down, they saw the stuff going into Century City and Beverly Hills and all that. And look, I don't condone violence, but I understand the frustration. I understand what brought those protesters there. I lived through the LA riots. I remember the perimeter they created to keep them out, to keep the protesters and the looters out of Beverly Hills, out of West LA, out of Torrance, out of Santa Monica. That didn't happen this time. They were vulnerable. So I live in a neighborhood in Long Beach that, and brother, you've been there. It's sort of a typical upper middle class white neighborhood, and it was the funniest thing to me because I'm driving down the street, headed home, and they're having a little parade, and it's a Black Lives Matter parade, and they're all putting up their Black Lives Matter signs, and I'm thinking, this would have never happened 30 years ago. But why is it happening? It's not happening because they believe, We just need to do the right thing. It's happening because of fear. Because they know if they don't do the right thing, this isn't going to be just, okay, throw them a few bones and they'll shut up and we'll just move on. Change, we are at a place now where change has to happen for their sake, for everybody's sake. So we as Black people are in a position of power. We need to recognize that. We need to organize quick. We need to build an agenda quick. And we need to start enforcing that agenda, because we have a window of opportunity here, because they are listening now. They truly are listening now. But if we squander this opportunity, and if we back up, and if we accept the okie doke, do not accept the okie doke. If we accept the okie doke, we're going to be back where we were before. But worse. So I think, yes, I think that we have been frustrated. I think we haven't been heard, but I think we're being heard now, and it's up to us to make sure they keep hearing us.
Absolutely. Yeah. Look, this is something that I've been witnessing here in the city of Inglewood, just to throw it out there. And we had a similar conversation to this, Travis, last week or so. I can't remember. But the things that are being brought to the attention of the council is good arguments, right? Depending on when it comes to changes in renter, how you rent, how you own in the city of Inglewood, all that great stuff. But their approach is, as an organization, I will not call it out, but there's an organization that is organized partially to come into the council meetings to really voice their thoughts and opinions on what the mayor and the council are doing. But to me, their approach is all wrong. No matter how you're met, your approach should remain the same, right? And consistent. But something that Mr. Ludlow is saying is that we have to come with a full agenda. We can't just come rattling off certain things in objection to what the mayor and the council have decided to do for the city of Inglewood that maybe they thought is best. Now, most folks say, oh, they're getting paid from this and that. Look, you don't know that to be so, or maybe you do. Right. But in all, it's how do we clearly articulate a plan that gets the mayor and the council on our side to truly implement the change that affects the Black community, right? But we got to have a plan.
I was going to say, you know, the thing that I've noticed, and Ludlow and I look like we're different ages, but he and I are probably the same age, because at least I feel that age. But the thing that I've noticed is I have to shave mine off because they won't let me wear it. But the thing I've noticed the most, Matthew, is the fact that once upon a time, there were clear leaders. I think the biggest difference now is everybody wants to lead and very few want to follow. Yes. The fact that nobody wants to follow means we're all going in different directions. And we need, in order to have that clear agenda, in order to have that clear, concise plan, now there are people who come from different walks of life, Black people that have been successful. I think the biggest thing, because you know I got to deal with protests all the time, so I'm hearing things and listening to people speak. I think the biggest thing is the fact that nobody knows what direction to go into. Nobody's asking people that are successful at whatever they want to do, what should I do to get to where you are? Oh, that's wrong because I would do it this way. Well, you've never done it. Why don't you ask the man who's doing it? Ask the attorney, ask the small business owner. You won't shop at his place, but you buy products that are sold there. Why don't you ask him? Why don't you ask him for those opportunities? How did you get to where you are? Why do you own this many restaurants and this many chains and this many? Why are you I know a brother, the only Black man in LA with the license to sell Nike. And nobody that looks like him goes in his store. Wow. Incredible. You know what I mean? So these are the things that we try to instill in young people. Look, everybody comes through us, let's partner you up with a mentor. If you're interested, I'll partner you up with somebody. If you want into acting, hey, we got a list of people here that you may want to speak to. You want to be a business owner? We got a list. You want to be an attorney? You want to be a doctor? Hey, man, let's go send you to work with those guys. I don't have the answers, but I know somebody who does.
A lot of it too comes from ego. Another part comes from just not asking the questions. We don't ask. you know. And then the third is sometimes you have those people that don't want to give that information up. I come from each one teach one. You know, if I can attain the information, it's my birthright, it's my duty to be able to pass on that information and not hold on to that information, because me holding on to the information doesn't do anything.
It does nothing.
You know, it doesn't do anything. And for me to pass that information on, I think that's part of setting who you are as a person, but also your legacy, because you're passing that torch on to the next person. So I think those three things are haunt us in the Black community.
Absolutely.
You know, we don't want to ask questions. I was just talking to some young kids. I say, if you don't know the answer, ask somebody. Period. And don't feel like you're going to get bullied or you're going to be made fun of because you don't know that answer. And I think that's 80 to 90% of it, is that if I ask, I don't want to seem like I don't know. But in fact, if you don't know, ask somebody.
You know, to his point, and I don't want to get into a bunch of law enforcement stories, but I'm just going to give this one. We had a location that was getting burglarized every Friday night, Saturday night. So we did what we had to do, and we finally caught these two guys. And all in all, when it all came down to it, it was a 17-year-old brother and an 18-year-old brother. And it broke my heart. I said, man, why are you guys doing this? I said, man, we're trying to finance studio time. We're trying to cut an album. We go in there, we get what we need to get, and we sell it on the street to pay for studio time. I'm like, man, had you said something, we can get you all the studio time you want for free. But now I got to call somebody to get you out of this situation because I can't let you walk away. You've been hitting this spot for 6 weeks. All you had to do was say something. We could have got all of this stuff pro bono with no problems. But like he said, number one, we don't ask. But number two, we often don't know who to ask. You know, it's because a lot of us that have opportunities for people don't share them. Right. We're so busy in the Black community, especially, we're so busy trying to make ends meet. We don't think about the kid that's sitting on the porch all the time that doesn't live in our house. We walk past, man, you guys stay out of trouble. We keep it moving. Yep. We tell kids to go to college, but what does that mean? Right. You don't know anybody going to college. Right. You know, so those are issues.
I think that's what's different about the times when I was a kid, is that there's a generational gap that don't communicate with one another. And I think as leaders in the community, we need to take more time to reach down and say, hey, what is it that you need? What is it that you're looking for? What are you interested in? What are you passionate about? If you were rich and didn't have any care in the world, what would you do? And then spawn that conversation with the next generation. And one of the things you said about leaders and followers, you said there's no leaders and the ones they don't want to follow. Bunch of leaders, but you feel. But what I would say is there's a bunch of influencers. Most people are judged by, your social media following and how many followers you have. And so I think as people who are visionaries of our community, I think one of the things that we should think about is getting those influencers together and creating a single heartbeat or a single drum beat that we can kind of function on in our community. And that starts with having that agenda. The reason why the Jewish community, they can move something forward is they're all on the same strategy for, this is what we want. Well, right now we're in a position to actually ask for what we want, but as a community, we don't know what to ask for. Right. And so, but if we could get on the same page about strategies 1, 2, and 3, get the influencers on board with it, they will start their social media campaigns and whatnot around that same agenda. Then I think that'll create people to say, oh yeah, you know what? I do want that. I do want equality. I do want to go to college, and I do want the same rights as these other communities. So I think that's the direction that we should be thinking about taking moving forward.
To add on to that too, when you say influencers, because I'm in the entertainment industry, some of those influencers get scared because they have these sponsorships. So they don't want to be too pro-Black, and lose these sponsorships. And at the same time, your influencers are the ones who help you get the sponsorship.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? So it's interesting because during the whole Black Lives Matter, there were a bunch of influencers that people were calling out. You know, and it was just like, hey, you do all this other stuff, but when it's really time to get down to the nitty gritty, where are you? You know, and those people got called out. And you know, I've always told people, and just being in the industry, is that, you know, if you have a platform, use it for good. Period. You know, for me, with my platform, I definitely talk about the business. I talk about health and wealth, but I also talk about social issues. And I just will not be quiet about it because I'm a Black man in America, period. And it affects me, you know. So the following that I have, and I have a lot of new followers because of the show. And a lot of these followers are white kids, Asian kids, Hispanic kids. And I feel it is my duty to get this information out to you so you can start doing research and really truly understand. And it was one during the whole George Floyd, I put out a bunch of information dealing with Black Wall Street, dealing just with a lot of history that wasn't taught in the school system. Right. And I had so many kids DM me like, wow, why was not taught? Why was not taught this? Right. You know, why is this information not given to me in school? Right. And that right there sent the bell, and I was just like, yeah, this is why we have social media. This is why I do this, because it gives you the opportunity now to be exposed to something that you weren't exposed to not only educate yourself, but also build empathy and sympathy, period.
They took life skills out of the California State high school curriculum. How am I supposed to interview for a job, find a job, even articulate that I want a job if there's no formal course for that ever? You don't have the basics. I mean, it blows my mind to see somebody, you know, I'm out in the community all the time. When you walk into a restaurant, coffee shop, whatever, you see somebody interviewing for a job. The appearance of some people is disheartening, but nobody's told them. It's clear nobody's told them. You sit over there with a pair of jeans and white socks and a polo shirt trying to sit up proper. You know, your posture's good, but everything else is just terrible.
I had a guy show up on an interview a few weeks ago with a bonnet on.
See?
No joke.
I believe it.
A bonnet. And I'm like, there's some other reasons why he was disqualified. But one of the first was like, you showing up with a wife beater on or an A shirt and a bonnet on.
And nobody told him otherwise.
And she's like, oh, I'm sorry. Should we reschedule? Right. It's like, but these are the things that are continuing to plague. But also it's giving them, the others, reasons not to hire us. Right. And so let me go back to this question, and I'm gonna wrap segment 2 up here with each a final question for you all. But Mr. Ludlow, the question that I have as part 2 of yours is, how do we demand better? Right. And I think that in this conversation, it was initially written of demanding more and better from those who oppose us, right? But I think it's also necessary for us to look on how do we demand better for ourselves as a Black community. So with that, it's like, if you can, just outline some very practical steps. And like I like to say, like, we can talk about the what, but let's move into the how. Like, what are those practical steps that we can take to demand more on the others? And we can talk about legally or just straight up, just generically, of how we demand more from ourselves or from the communities that oppose us.
Well, you know, what we constantly see that is a barrier within the community is resources. It's a barrier to everything, you know. So clearly systemic racism is structured in such a way that taking life skills out of the curriculum and things like that, it's structured in such a way as to keep us, to keep our young people from developing and being able to become productive. We're always fighting against, you know, these forces that are trying to keep our young people down. So it's incumbent upon us, those with the mental capital and the intellectual capital and the financial capital, to give of ourselves, you know, and create programs and finance these programs. There's, you know, the Black community it has a lot of wealth collectively. So we have to invest in our own community, and we have to invest into our own young people because they don't care about our young people. And we start creating the people, these people that have the skills to come into an interview and dress appropriately and conduct themselves appropriately. So we have to create these programs, and we have to finance them. We have to design them, and we have to maintain them. And there's plenty of us with the skill set to do that. But we have to care enough. We have to care enough to say, you know what? It's not enough just for me to have my, you know, Mercedes-Benz and my house in the Ladera Heights and, my white friends who I hang out with on the weekend. That's not enough. I have an obligation to my community to bring them up, because if they do better, I would do better. So it starts with us. And if we can organize ourselves and give of ourselves and step outside of our own, little world, our bubble, and reach back into the community. And I know this sounds cliche because this isn't a new idea, but it's something that we have. At this point in history, you see where America's going. You see where the world is going. You see what's happening. Change is coming one way or another. So is change going to come through us integrating the left out into society, or is change going to come from revolution? Because that's going to be the next stage, revolution. Because they don't care about they don't care about somebody's nice mansion. They don't care about your wealth. They don't care about any of that. They can't partake in it. They don't. There's going to be unrest. Yep. So we have not only is it in our best interest to do this, but we have a duty to do it. Mm-hmm. The majority group doesn't quite understand that they have a vested interest in it. Mm-hmm. They don't quite understand that they have a vested interest in ending systemic racism. Mm-hmm. That it no longer works for them. Right. They don't quite understand that yet. Yeah. But we do. So we need to use our resources to strengthen our community and to create the infrastructure that we're talking about, and create the programs and create the platform and the agenda which we're going to take to them. Yeah, that's correct. And basically, you want our vote. You want you. We're speaking. Yeah, no, we're not a monolithic. We're not one monolithic group, but we're on these issues. We're speaking as one. Absolutely. And you want our vote? What's it worth to you? What's it worth to you?
Yep. Absolutely.
That's it.
A gentleman who posted something. He wasn't a part of our community, but I definitely oppose what he said. He says he gets tired when people ask him for a minute of his time. And I'm like, I don't know what his role is. Apparently I've worked with him before in some capacity within experiential. I don't know what he does now. But anyways, he says that I get sick and tired of when people ask me for a minute of my time. Mm-hmm. He says, yeah, I got a minute of my time, but not for you. I have a minute, but not for you. Mm-hmm. And so I responded very, very eloquently. I said, hi, how conceited is this comment? Mm-hmm. For you not to say you will give someone who admires who you are and where you are a minute of your time. Yeah. It goes back to the point of asking. Mm-hmm. We have not because we asked not. We went to church in the first segment. So I'll throw in that now. Like, we have not because we asked not. Yep. So what I said was that if people to this day says, Matthew, I admire what you've done. I've seen you do this, blah, blah, blah. You've always been this person, blah, blah, blah. How have you done it? And or if somebody says, hey, I've been watching you evolve. I want to know how you've done it. You know what I say? I send them an email, text, whatever it is. I appreciate you admiring who I am and where I am. Is nothing but the grace of God. So bless God for that, number one. Mm-hmm. Second of all, let's talk. Here's a link to my calendar. Schedule a time that's most convenient for you. Before you schedule, I need to know what you admire most and how you think I can help. That way, when we get on the call, it's not a bunch of blah, 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 blah,
Right.
but the call is structured. Because in that qualification, I may say, hey, you need to talk to Travis Fenderson. Or you know what? I think Kareem is going to be your best bet, right? But even so, with that being said, I tied into what you said, Mr. Lowe, is that we need to take the resources, those who live in the middle class, white suburban neighborhoods, or those who have done well for themselves. We need to take the time out and invest it in those who want to come up or those who need more. But if we continue to suppress our wealth, I said this to this gentleman. I said, I disqualify the blessings of God when I don't give somebody else a minute of my time.
There it is. Yep.
I disqualify the blessings from my blessings. And I would be a fool if I disqualify or discredit what I've been blessed with because I'm selfish and so into myself and what I have that I can't bless somebody else.
You over here preaching, brother.
I'll be a fool.
Yeah.
And so I just posted this on Facebook. I don't care what the pandemic has done. This year, I'm doing my bike drive. It's year 3. Last year, we did 100 bikes. This year, this year will be year 4. We're doing 125 bikes. 5 schools, 2 states. Been doing it for 4 years. Now this will be 4 years. But I don't care what the pandemic's been doing. And here's the thing is that it may not be bikes. I talked with the principal at Fort Worth. They need laptops. Right? We all know what's happening right now with laptops. So now I'm about to find somebody. Maybe that school needs laptops. Maybe these kids need bikes. But they will be blessed.
Yeah.
But why would I discount my blessing and say, oh, we're in a pandemic, all this, if I don't take the time to bless somebody else?
Sometimes people need their soul shook. Sometimes people get a little too wound up in their day to day. They need that soul shook a little bit. And once that's right. Once they step out that coupe and the world slaps them in the face, that perspective changes really quickly.
My dad said this. He says, never think you're too high on your horse that you can't come down. Never think you're sitting up there. I gave this story, and I'm going to go over here to Mr. Damon here, is that there was a lady in my apartment community in Dallas that was getting her car towed. And at the time, we were sitting on the porch. Me and somebody were sitting on the porch, and I was looking down because they parked next to me under our carport. And I looked down, and I was like, oh, man, that car is nice. Like, they had these rims on it, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, always admired that car. And although it's a similar car. Or the same car. And as they were getting towed, there were some folks, part of the white community, going into the pool. And they was like, that's not a tow. That's a repo. That's a repo. Like out loud. So as you know, when you're under the canopy of a pool, it's going to echo. So I heard it at least 50 yards away, hearing that it's being repoed. And I was like, why would she do that? You know, I'm like now you're embarrassing this couple who is sitting on the edge of the brick wall watching their car being towed, repoed. And that's what my dad told me. I told him the story because my car should have been repoed a long time ago. Bless God, it's paid off back there. But the thing is that he says, son, he said, that's a shame. He said, but what I want you to carry is that never think you're too high on your horse, that you can't come down.
Yep.
So we do have a role
Absolutely.
as a Black community, folks who are doing well to give back to those who need us. They may not be impoverished economically, but maybe it's mentally,
Yeah.
right? So we need to shift their mindset and shift the narrative. So, Mr. Damon, I'm gonna close on these final 4 questions here. Is for you is when it comes to small business and entrepreneurship, is what role do we as small business owners and entrepreneurs have in helping to shift this tide? I don't want to focus just on racial inequity or racial bias, but overall, what role do we have as entrepreneurs, small business owners to shift this tide when it comes to shifting the mindsets of the Black community?
I think the biggest thing that comes to mind as in shifting the small business community is there needs to be a multi-dimensional mentorship strategy. There should be someone that you are reaching out to for advice. There should be a peer community, and then there should be a group that you're mentoring. And I think if you can do that, that will make a dramatic shift in the small business community, because that person's been ahead of you. They're 10, 20 years ahead of you, most likely, and they've been able to overcome some of the hurdles that you might come against, and they can help you, gauge yourself accordingly. Then the peer community is the community that's going to hold you accountable. And this is a very important thing that we need to talk about in terms of small business. You know, for example, have you ever gone to a business and they didn't really, you know, they could do better, but instead of saying something to them, you just moved on. I'm not gonna come back here anymore. Well, I think that is doing a total disservice to the small business community. I think we need to be bold enough to say, hey, listen, I want to support Black business. I want to support your business. These are some of the opportunities I see that you could do differently that would entice someone like me to continue to come back, and also tell other people to come to your business. And so I think a lot of times we need to change that internal narrative, and it takes a little bit more effort on our behalf to do that, to give them constructive criticism and not just talk bad about the business, right? And say the whole narrative that you know, Black people don't do what to say, Black people, it's Black business, you know.
Just give them grace.
So no, you hold them accountable and you say, hey, listen, this is what I see. This is where I see things could be better, and this is what will entice me to come back. And then also you got these young entrepreneurs out there, like, for example, I use the example of the kid in front of the grocery store selling the candy. Stopping and talking to that kid and say, hey, you know what? I did that. I did that when I was your age, and now look, I'm whatever you are, and tell your story. Another thing is telling your story is a very important thing as well. Absolutely. Do you know how many felons there are that actually own their own business, successful business, right? And they probably don't publicize it, because who wants to publicize that they're a felon? But in reality, some felons need to hear that story. They need to hear that, hey, you know what? I ran my own business because I was a felon. I couldn't get a job. And look, I created this business, and you can too. So, if I can do it, you can do it. So those are the things that I feel will make the greatest impact in the small business community, is that triune relationship, or tri-dimensional mentoring relationship, accountability, and then awareness, sharing your story.
That's good. Sharing the story is so big. And I'm going to touch on that at the end in the closing of segment 2. I'm going to pass the mic to Travis when it comes to even the youth reaching back out. When you see yourself as a little kid at Target selling the candy bars, that was once you. Now tell them the story. Our next generation, the folks that you with the Travis with the Step Foundation spend so much time with, not only there, but also in the line, in the duty of a law enforcement officer, spend a lot of time with the next generation. What role do they have in shifting the tide when it comes to societal racial bias, inequities, injustices, etc.? What role does that next generation play?
As big of a role as adults. Because who are we going to? There's going to come a time when I am going to be too tired to get off the couch. And somebody, I tell my boys, you know, it sounds crazy, but hey, listen, man, I need you to do okay, because someday I'm going to need you. You might need to wipe my butt, but I need you to be able to do that. It's the truth. So I you know, those are the things that it's big that they know, you know, because at some point I'm going to forget what to tell them. You know, I will have, as they always say, I've forgotten more than you know. So I need to give them as much as I can early. So when the time comes and they have families, they have, he said influencers earlier. Somebody has to teach those people how to influence, what to influence. You know, I mean, Black community, we don't really teach our kids. Maybe it's changing now, but for the most part, I bet if I went around this room, how many of us had parents that taught us how to run finances in a household? Well, if you're a parent or a child that doesn't have that parent, you have a single parent working 2-3 jobs. You don't spend much time with them. Where are you going to learn? It's not from watching them. You know, I mean, the average kid in a 24-hour day, they leave home around 7 o'clock in the morning. They come home around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, 6 o'clock. Most of your waking hours, you're in the streets. So when do you, weekends, we all know, you got chores to do. If your parents work on the weekends, when do you get to spend time and sit on the couch and talk about real life things? You know, these are things that kids have to learn from somebody. So, I mean, I take it upon myself, guys like me, ladies like me. Hey, look here. You teach him this, you teach them that. Anything you don't know, let's figure out somebody who does, because those are the people that have to. Every society has changed on youth. It's not 40 and over, 50 and over, 60 and over. It's youth. You look out here at all these protests. These are youth. These are high school age, college age kids. But they only know what they've been taught. Because if they had to figure it out for themselves, look where we are today.
That's rich. There's a common message here, and the common message is to find one who can help push you ahead.
At least one.
At least one. And then those who are ahead, we have a responsibility to reach one. We have a responsibility. Mr. Ludlow, Mr. Kareem, please final words, and I'm gonna close this out, and we're gonna move into segment number 3.
Well, I just want to say that, related to what I do, the law is the underpinning of just about everything in this society. It's the underpinning of business, underpinning, it affects the educational system, how you live, where you live, what your rights are in the place you live in. It affects, you getting loans. It affects you in the employment arena. It affects us in the entertainment field. The law reaches everywhere. And so what I try to do and what I try to give back is, I try to do as much pro bono work as I can. And I try to educate people and empower people about their rights under the law. I had a kid today. He's involved in a domestic situation where his wife went and got a restraining or tried to get a restraining order against him and is trying to use it to get custody of their son. And he went in there and he wanted me to go with him. I said, I can't go because I have to work. I have things to do, but I will coach you and you go in there and handle it. And so I told him everything he needed to do. He went in there. He called me. He said, this is a happy call. I just want to let you know I won. And I went in there and I cross-examined, and she had her own lawyer, and I cross-examined him. And the judge said, you know what? It looks like you're just trying to, frame him so that you can get custody, and ruled and ruled against her. The judge ruled against her. And he felt so empowered. You know what I mean? And I said, I'm proud of you, man. You did that yourself. You went and handled your own legal situation yourself. All you needed was me to give you, a little bit of talking points and a little bit of direction, and you went in there and you did it yourself. So now he's like, I want to go to law school. I want to be, But I mean, I felt so good.
Spark.
Because that's, that's what our people need. That's what our young people need. That's what our community needs. We need to be able to reach out and get some guidance, in legal situations, whatever it may be, because it's not always a criminal situation. That's just one situation we deal with, but all kinds of situations. And, we need the help of a tax professional and an accountant. And, and we, with those skills, need to be willing to give them. And not just say, well, I charge you $400 an hour. You can't afford me. Well, we can't do that, because the reality is eventually those people are going to be our customer base. If they're doing well financially, they're going to be our customer base. So we help the community. We help them to raise their fortunes. We benefit. Yeah.
Mr. Kareem.
Adding with what these brothers have said, for me, because everybody is like, oh man, you're on TV and you responded to me and talked to me. And, I just remember coming up, people that spoke into my life and took time out of their, just took time out to just give me a couple of pointers. I think it's, like I said before, it's my right. It's my birthright to give information back and not to hold on to it. So, for me, I try to give as much information as I can, but also to just empower the youth to, find out what they want to do, and if they like drawing, or if they like, being a fashion, that there's a job for them in the entertainment industry, period. So I try to find out what they like. What is your passion? And then from there, I can tell them, hey, well, did you know that if you like driving, you can become a driver in the entertainment industry where they just drive trucks or be a grip, So I try to find out things and just lead them to, you know, whatever that job is in the entertainment industry. And I think as long as I keep sharing information, you know, I keep getting blessings. And I think, you know, that hit home for me. And I think that's the reason why that I know that I've been blessed, is because I give my time, and I don't ask, oh, well, you know, if you pay me, I can give you. No, it's not about that. It's about sharing information. And I think as we share information to the youth as much as possible, that right there is such an impact, and that you're depositing something into that person's life, whether you know it or not.
Oh, this is huge.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, thank you very, very, very much for the time tonight. This information I see is invaluable. I see some things in the comments here, invaluable information that our Black community needs. And this is just the beginning.
Yeah.
This is not the end. Yeah. There's so much more work for us to do. And this is my message for everyone watching tonight, is that the message that we have to give to the Black community must be invaluable. Is that when we get people in front of the room, there has to be information that is shared that can help change the trajectory of our future, of the future of the Black community. When it comes to embracing and leveraging the skill set of a lawyer, leveraging the skill set of a community leader, leveraging the skill set of an entertainer, leveraging the skill set of a small business owner or an entrepreneur, this is what we need. This is what the community needs to truly drive us forward. But the underlying message tonight that I really want you all to pull away from segment 2 tonight, we still got segment 3 on deck tonight. You don't want to miss it. The underlying message is to find at least one, like Travis said, find at least one person who can help elevate you to the next level with whatever that means. Never hesitate to ask a question. There is no wrong question. The only wrong question is the one that you don't ask. Choose tonight that make the decision that this night will be the start of the best days that are ahead of you. But you, my friend, must make a change. It starts with us, the Black community. Segment 3 is on deck. Don't lose your seat. We'll be right back.
Hey, how are you? Would there be an echo?
What's up, everybody? It's Matthew Newman. We are back for a segment on totally free needed content in the Black community. This is segment number 3 for me, but I'm truly excited because the conversation close out segment 2 have truly been invaluable. These are the conversations that are needed in our community to help propel us forward. And we must tackle this from all angles. My pastor in Dallas said one thing. He says that when people look at racial inequities, racial injustices, they only look at police brutality or figuring out how do we bring in community and police or bridging the gap between community and police. But what we don't look at ways in which we can increase financial or improve financial knowledge or financial literacy in our community. We don't look at how Blacks are affected mentally when it comes to pandemics. We don't look at the role that the church plays in helping to rid racial bias in society. And so tonight for group number 3, this is one that you certainly do not want to miss. And the folks that I have here, 2 in person, 1 via teleconference or video conferencing on the line, are some folks who have been there and done it and are continuing to do it in 2020 amid the pandemic. And on my far right, on the left side of your screen, you have a gentleman who I think a lot of, actually everyone here tonight that you've seen in group 1, 2, and 3, I think a lot of. But this gentleman is one, as I always say, is very well studied, one who is very well versed in a lot of different things. His day-to-day work, he's a project manager, VP of a phenomenal company, doing some great things here in the city of LA. But he's also the lead pastor of the Bridge Community Church, which is a ministry that is truly thriving amidst a pandemic. And so with that, I want to introduce to each and every one of you, drop your thumbs up or your 7s in the chat and welcome Rufus Chambers. Woo!
All right. Thank you, Matthew Newman, for the wonderful introduction. And thank you for inviting me to be a part of this timely conversation.
Absolutely.
I look forward to diving in this evening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The wonderful lady in yellow who is sitting here in the room is Miss Jerica Gilliam. Gilliam. Yeah. Okay, I had it right. Okay. Thank you. I've been knowing her for a few months, but I'll never say her last name until now. But this is someone who is plugged into the community. And this is when I introduce her or talk about her to certain folks, I always say this is what a true influencer is. And Damon talked about that a little bit. We typically measure people and their influence based off social following, but it doesn't matter. That is irrelevant when it comes to the connections that you have in the community. And from the very first time that I met her, I realized that she's plugged in to the community, into Urban League, etc. And also she's a licensed, of course, got to be licensed, and also a master's level marriage and family therapist associate. And so she does great work. I often hear her on trainings here at the co-working space as well, but very articulate and very intelligent intelligent in what she does. So we would like to welcome Miss Jerica to the panel tonight.
Thank you. And I'm not licensed yet.
Oh, not licensed yet. All good.
But definitely working towards this.
But you are master's level, so
yes.
That's good.
Clinical psychology, yes.
Welcome. And the last but certainly not least, the young lady who is tuning in via video conferencing is someone that I definitely have to think a lot of. Just kidding. But someone who is the true catalyst when it comes to educational change. It's very difficult at times to do the work of an educator because you automatically feel as though you are in a rat race or a race that you simply cannot escape to define a rat race. But this young lady truly helps emphasize what it truly means to be an educator in 2020. Right? She really takes the time to understand the children. She's a Howard grad. Also, she's a Harvard grad. She's a part of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, but a phenomenal young lady who I've come to know over these years. And I could talk all day about her because she is my wife, Miss Jasmia Newman. We want to welcome you to tonight's panel. So excited to be here. And so let's take a dive into tonight's conversation. Because this is going to be very timely because we're talking about 3 different verticals that really affect the Black community. We're talking about religion and spirituality. We're talking about mental health. And we're also talking about education. Again, something that most folks don't really pay attention to and how disadvantaged the Black and brown children, let's keep it in the Black community tonight, the Black and brown folks are discounted when it comes to education in 2020 and even the years before. So I'm excited to take a deep dive into this. But I want to start off with Jasmia. And what I want to start off with, of course, as I will with each of the panelists in group 3 tonight, is really explain a little bit about yourself, your background, and what your journey has been like in education. But most importantly, what I would like you to touch on is what is the relationship between COVID-19 and inequality in urban schools? What is the relationship between COVID-19 and inequality in urban schools?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Jasmia Newman here. I am a very proud native of Chicago, Illinois, specifically West Suburbs, Maywood. And I had the opportunity to study at Howard University as well as Harvard University. I served as a special education teacher, an assistant principal, and principal here now in South Los Angeles area. And if I had to say the relationship between COVID-19 and the impact in urban education, if you all don't know, there will be a significant learning loss that will be greatly impacted in our low-income Black and Latinx communities. And they're going to be students that are going to be significantly impacted because they won't be able to access a quiet space at home with minimal distractions. They won't have devices that are optimal for learning, high-speed internet, the parental academic supervision. So there are a number of things that we are significantly going to be disadvantaged with when it comes to accessing high quality distance learning education. So we are working so hard to figure out what gaps we can close when it comes to giving our students a high quality education in this environment. It is tough, it's hard. We're trying to build the plane while flying it. And it seems as though if it's not one thing after the next, we already have this significant gap, and this gap is going to get bigger if we're not simply extremely innovative in our approach.
Is that no folks are going to have such a gap in communication, in education because of this pandemic? Is I want to ask this question is, how do we explain the difference? Now everybody can say that there will be a gap everywhere, right? The gap meaning there'll be a gap in South LA, there'll be a gap at Beverly Hills, there'll be a gap in Palm Springs, there'll be a gap for all people learning. So how do we combat the issue that Blacks are truly affected by the pandemic? How do we combat that? If the argument is that there's a gap everywhere, how do we combat the gap that Blacks are at a greater disadvantage? How do we combat that?
I think it has nothing to do with COVID-19. We have to take it back to where this thing started. We have to take it back to this systemic racial structures that have been put in place that have been against us since the start. And that's economic opportunities for our families, that's healthcare, that's significant access to food. We're in food deserts. These things go beyond just COVID-19. We got to look way back into the elements that have been playing against us. And until we address those things, we're not gonna progress forward, because now COVID-19 is just something that has been added on top of other things that we must address. But as Black people, we always do with what we got, and we struggle to still get to the top. We are having to dig into this bag of innovation to get to homes, to do home visits, to get families to come in, to get them Wi-Fi, get them free Wi-Fi. Is all the resources and the money needs to come in for us to be able to supply these things for our families. But honestly, we're dealing with things that we've been dealing with for the past 50, 60, 100 years that are plaguing us. And now COVID-19 is just the icing on the cake.
You heard a conversation.
But that's what it is.
You heard a conversation that I had with one of the principals, and I mentioned this in a previous group earlier. I don't remember if it was group 1 or group 2, but you heard the conversation that I had about my bike drive this year. Do I give bikes to your school, or is there a greater need? And one of the greater needs was laptops, right? So one of the things you just mentioned, systemically, we've been oppressed. Systemically, we're struggling with access to Wi-Fi, right? Kareem just said that he's gone to St. Louis with a cousin to mobilize Wi-Fi in underdeveloped communities or urban communities where we have less access to laptops. We have less access, again, take it back, to real textbooks, right? We don't have enough textbooks to pass around the classroom so that every kid has a book to take home and to do the proper studying. So systemically, we've been oppressed. So that's the argument. The argument is that the Black community has been feeling this. This is nothing new. We've been feeling the effects of COVID-19. We've been feeling the effects of racial inequities and injustices. We've been feeling this. So what may be new for you, yeah, it may take you a week to get a Google Chromebook, but it's been taking us months to get one. You know, the school that I spoke to today in Fort Worth said they won't get new laptops until the late September, early October. Kids have been in school for a month. So these are the things that are truly plaguing the Black community when it comes to education. So thank you very much. And so we have this other issue, Pastor Rufus, that we go into when it comes to the church, right? And so we've gone to church in each of these segments, by the way, so y'all should be prepared for this one if we go there. But the thing that we really looked at tonight is all of the areas, as I said in the introduction, all the areas that have really plagued the community. And now the Black church more than ever is feeling it, right? And so one of the questions that I would like to ask you, Pastor Rufus, tonight, of course, tell us about yourself, but can the Black church survive the pandemic? That's a question. Can the Black church survive the pandemic, and can pastors afford to miss a Sunday?
Yeah, no, thank you, Matthew. That's a great question. And, you know, my immediate response to that is to the question, you know, will the Black church survive the pandemic? And I would say, yes, in its entirety, the Black church will endure this challenging time, because you have to think about, even here in Inglewood, you know, a lot of the churches in the community, they are in the foundation of the city and of the region. So I feel like, you know, all of the generations of labor that these churches and these pastors have sowed into this community, it will sustain. But I feel like the better question is, what will the surviving church look like, you know, post COVID-19? And that's where I feel like there will be some churches that are able to be agile enough to reimagine themselves in a manner that they can sustain this new duality. And the duality I'm speaking of is this virtual room that we're in right now, and coupled with the ability to gather in some way, shape, or form. So I feel like, you know, the question is, what does that reimagined church look like after the pandemic? And that puts a challenge to church leaders to reimagine. Not only reimagine how you have worship service, but okay, let's reimagine our budgets. Let's reimagine our brick and mortar. Let's reimagine our leadership model, because some churches that may have been more traditional and somewhat antiquated, and the churches that resisted technology, they've been exposed in the pandemic. So some of the reimagining to ensure that we can sustain is to understand that we have to now take the timeless message, the timeless gospel, but now we have to superimpose it in a contemporary fashion that is able to sustain this time. You know, and you asked about, you know, can the church afford to cancel services? And, you know, the truth of the matter is, I've seen good examples of both. I've seen good examples of churches that are 100% virtual that have been able to financially weather the storm, you know, because the truth of the matter is, as you know, as an entrepreneur, what the pandemic has done, it's also afforded the opportunity to lower some overhead costs and eliminate some of the excess in budgets, because there's not this pressing need to have this big in-person presentation. You know, so I believe, as you know, for some churches, overhead has went down and some giving has been able to be consistent. Guess what? There are some good examples of that. The flip side is, I believe some churches will not be able to come out of the pandemic because it's hard to build a house in the middle of a storm. You know what I mean? We're understanding what Louisiana And Texas is going through right now, literally, you know, I don't have a watch on, but literally they're literally in this weather situation. And guess what? You can't build a foundation in a storm. So for some churches that were already behind the 8 ball, it may be impossible for them to reimagine and build in the middle of a pandemic. Yeah. And that's okay, because in our area, South Los Angeles and Inglewood, there are plenty of local churches where believers can still find a place that they can be ministered to. That's right. You know what I mean? So I believe that it's not going to be this huge falling away, because there's going to be countless churches that can't endure, but some seasons in some local churches will end. And some new seasons will begin for new churches and new leaders that are emerging. And that's the truth of the matter is, I believe what God is doing, he's bringing validation to some churches and some leaders in the midst of a pandemic. You know what I mean? Because we're seeing that in civic leadership. We're seeing that in government, where the need of the time is demanding leadership. And some leaders are able to rise to the occasion and some leaders are not. So those that are able to rise to the occasion, I believe that they're going to have a front seat in this reimagined church of the future.
And what greater time is there for us as the church, the capital C, right? The church, to really emphasize to our members, to the body of Christ, to say, this is a time where your faith should increase, right? This is when you need that God type of faith. Yeah. So we as church leaders have a responsibility to re-emphasize that to our members. Like there's a study here in Pew Research, and it says that some Americans say their religious faith has strengthened as a result of the outbreak. Here it says is that 1/4 of US adults overall, 24%, say their faith has become stronger because of the pandemic, while just 2% say their faith has become weaker, right? So the question that we must ask ourselves, and as church leaders either watching it now or will rewatch this live stream, is that we need to capitalize on the 24%, right? We can capitalize on the 24%, the people who are saying my faith has increased. What can we do as church leaders to truly impact them, to influence them, to move beyond these walls that we call a pandemic? What can we do? We have an incentive as leaders to truly reiterate to them that this is the time where we need to go out and mission even harder. Mission even harder. There's times when something that you started off, Pastor Rufus, by saying that we will survive this, right? The church will survive this. And there are many times that people have called us crazy over the years, right? They've called Black folks crazy. But one of the things that we can say is that we have overcome. The number of challenges that we have overcome is immeasurable. It's immeasurable. And Jerica, if you will, please talk a little bit about yourself. But I use that word crazy, that people have called us crazy, because they have been so surprised and stunned that we have overcome so much. They say, I've done this. I've done, like the story of Job. I've hit him. I've done this. I took his family, took his cattle, everything else, but he still survived. They're stunned by the outcome of our overcome. That's good. They're stunned by the outcome of our overcome. Psychology today says that most Black folks don't seek mental counseling or psychotherapy. Why? Because they will be considered crazy. What is your thoughts as a professional? Why do we in the Black community shy away from psychotherapy?
Okay, that is a great question. Yes, I'm going to introduce myself.
Please.
Jerica Gillum, Marriage and Family Therapist Associate. I'm originally from Texas.
Texas in the house.
Yes.
D-Town to be exact, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
Where I have a security company, G&G Protection Armed and Unarmed Services. As well as that, I service Compton, Watts, Long Beach, and all of the Los Angeles surrounding areas as a therapist, primarily working with kids in Compton and Watts. But to answer this question, there's a few different reasons. One, the stigma, which we all know, like there's this stigma about mental health, but it's also growing up and hearing, pray about it.
Yes.
You know, like, you know what? Pray about it. No one's giving these individuals that are dealing with depression, anxiety, PTSD, coping mechanisms to deal with their thoughts, their feelings, these feelings or emotions that they can't even put a name to. And so I think that it's several reasons. The stigma is one of them. The idea of being crazy, right? Because it's like, oh yeah, no, so and so's crazy, like, or Uncle Joe, he went to therapy, he was crazy. But what I tell people is, you don't have to tell anyone that you're going to therapy.
Yeah.
If you think that you're going to be stigmatized or judged, that is your own personal choice to get those mental health services that you need, and you don't have to tell anyone. But it is okay to pray about it, you know, Pastor. Pray about it, but also do what you need to do to protect your emotional stability. If you're sick, where are you going to go? You're going to go to the doctor, right? So if you're feeling sad or depressed or even having suicidal thoughts, then you need to go to a mental health professional, which would be the doctor or the professional for making sure that your mental stability and your peace is protected.
That's good. And it goes back to the question, or to the mention that we had in the second segment, was Kareem emphasized this, is the reason why we fall behind so much in our community is that we don't ask. We don't seek the help that's necessary because we're afraid of the stigma, right? And so when we deal with this, we deal, like, for example, Jasmia, you're a middle school principal, just got transferred from a high school. So you've been seeing this for so many years on so many different levels of how kids are affected because of mental health and every other reason. We have a young lady today, I can't remember who it was, that I was either hearing it or seeing it, that the kids are like, but he got killed, right? Or, but he got shot. Or, I'm afraid when I go home, I may get beat. You know, my friend posted today is that, like, parents, stop beating your kids on Zoom because Zoom don't work. It ain't their fault, right? So these kids are beginning to be impacted mentally so many times that what happens in the classroom is that teachers, oftentimes white teachers, don't understand the struggle that the Black kids are going through. Right? That's real. That's every single day. And so what happens is that because teachers don't understand what kids are going through, teachers bring some type of racial bias to the classroom. That what Jasmia, you taught me, was often covert. They're not aware that they're projecting it on the students, right? So Jasmia, as not only an educator, yes, that's what you do, but you are a principal, so you govern the school body. So you don't have to give examples, but what I would love to know is, what are some practical ways? You are really big on the how-tos. We can talk all day, but if we don't narrow it down to the how-tos, the 1, 2, 3s, then there's no progression. So if you will, please share some practical steps, 1, 2, 3s, that teachers, even white teachers, let's start there, that white teachers can do to eliminate racial bias in their classroom.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is going to start with work on self, and realizing that regardless of if you think you are anti-racist, not racist, racist, whatever, there's still a lot of work to be done internally. And one thing I want to call out is that racism is enough of a burden on Black educators, enough. So I can't teach you if, you know, I decide I cannot teach you to be better, to do better, to self-reflect. Like, that's not a burden to bear. That is something for you to understand that it's the work for you to do. Now, if I decide to help you, that's great, but don't think that it's the expectation. So I also think that white educators need to understand their white fragility, like in their white tears, and how that impacts their performance in the classroom, or overall as an educator. I think that we have to understand that your beliefs need to match your actions. So a lot of times we believe that, you know, Black students deserve this, Latinx students deserve that. You know, they've been so underserved for so long, but when we get in the classroom, we have these behavioral expectations that surely lead to school to prison pipeline. Or we have the language that we use that's covert racism. So we have to make sure that you got to check yourself at every single element, that your beliefs match the actions that you're doing in a classroom. So with that, we got to embrace the tough conversations and recognize the bias. A lot of that is painful. It hurts us internally. I'm just assuming as a white person that believes they've been doing right, but like ease into those conversations, embrace those conversations, and sit in a posture of a learner and one that wants to do better and get out of the savior complex, because you ain't here to save nobody. Like, we've been saving ourselves for a long time. Now, if you want to be an ally, we will welcome that, but you need to sit in a learner stance as you develop through this journey.
That's really, really good. And so there are a couple of things. It's like having those conversations that are often difficult, right? There's times where I hear you on the phone, Jasmine, not to give too much detail, but the conversations that are needed with white instructors to help them understand that they're communicating something that they may not know, right? There's some things that you've taught me. It's like you've overheard conversations of people who still look up to me from high school as their leader. It's like there's some things that I need to help you to see that you don't see, right? And so you as a—
But it's not your burden.
Say that again.
It's not your burden to bear.
That's another important part, right? Another important part is that there's sometimes a struggle because it also makes the environment uncomfortable, right? If someone is not willing to really embrace their covert language or embrace what they're experiencing or what they're projecting, especially onto the students. Like, we can get to educators, their fellow coworkers and school administrators and all that stuff later, but it's really getting in a comfortable space, in a safe space to say, hey, look, I really need to sit you down to help you to understand what it is you're communicating, right? It goes back to segment number 2 when we're saying, like, we just got to educate folks. And like, we're educators, right? So we got to educate folks on what they're projecting onto the kids and what type of mental impact that has on them. Because it's not just a right now impact. That impact is carried on for generations and generations and generations to come. And so again, we have that responsibility, again, similar to the point of with Pastor Rufus, like, we have the responsibility as church leaders to really influence the lives of those who are being positively affected. Right? We have that responsibility, not only as an educator, not only as church leaders, not only as mental health professionals, small business and entrepreneurs, as myself, but everyone. We have that responsibility to pour back into our community to get them on a good track. So Pastor Rufus you have something? Okay, just agree.
No, that's true.
So Pastor Rufus is we have this, what role do white educators have? We have this statement of the role that white educators have to eradicate racial bias. Same thing but now for the church, right? Mm-hmm. What role does the church? Now, people played on this all day long. Mm-hmm. People think, well, they do, is even in my study of education and ministry, is that we do have such a strong role in it. But can you define what that role really means to the folks? In the role of the church, the body of Christ, what role does the church have in helping to eradicate the societal racial bias that's so prevalent
Okay. Now, great question. And I will answer like this, very practically, the body of Christ, the local church, has a role to work on the inside and on the outside. So when I say work on the inside, I'm saying within the body, within the local church, the church has a responsibility to, and I'm laughing because it's really back to the basics of discipleship. And, that's obviously the Great Commission. Jesus Christ told his disciples that go make disciples of all nations. And part of that discipleship process should include leading people to grow in Christ in a manner in which they would confront their own racial proclivities. You know what I mean? Their own racial biases. In other words, our relationship with God should collide with some of our own bigotry or prejudices. You know, and I was having a conversation with a good friend of mine, Pastor Tommy, and he gave an excellent testimony of how his discipleship process included him confronting his own white privilege, in a sense, you know, that the persons that were discipling him took it to that level. And I feel like that's one of the best things that a church can do, is don't leave the child not raised to a place of maturity. So that includes having teachings, discussions, advisings, counselings to help believers understand that the will of God is that we wouldn't carry around racial bias and racial bigotry. You know what I mean? There should be an extraction of that as we grow in the word. You know what I mean? So that's number one. Then number two, that's working on the inside. The work on the outside is we're supposed to be the salt of the earth, yes, and we're supposed to be the light of the world. Yeah. So again, as we get our houses in order internally, we should carry that love into the world, yeah, so that we can be a witness, yeah, and so that we could draw others back to him. Yes. You know what I mean? As again, as we're being healed and made whole, and you know, those dark places are being eradicated in our hearts and minds, we should carry that light into the world. And I believe that's part of the problem of today, is that the body of Christ in general has not done a good job of demonstrating what that looks like. Yep. You know what I mean? To me, the world should be able to look at a believer or look at the body of Christ and say, wow, they have come to a place of maturity, yes, where they are no longer subject, yep, to racial prejudice and racial bigotry. Yes. You know what I mean? So again, the body of Christ should be a demonstration of what this thing looks like, you know, when the personhood of God gets on the inside and does a new work, where we can truly say that we are new creatures. You know, old things have been passed away. So I feel like that's what the church should be doing. Whether or not we're doing it or doing a good job, that, you know, that's another conversation. Yep. You know what I mean? And even back to the challenge of a leader in this hour of civil unrest, you know, as a Black pastor, I can't get lost in my own stuff, yeah, and neglect my job of being able to minister to people that are hurting and grieving, yes, and dealing with their own racial scars. You know what I'm saying? So that's the other thing is, yeah, I'm upset. I mean, I wrote this long essay last night on Facebook about me being fatigued, yep, but even in me being fatigued, I still have a responsibility. Yes. You know what I mean? Where, okay, within the inside, I should, as leaders, we should be a place where we can walk with people and help them carry their burdens. Yes. You know what I mean? So again, you know, the family that has been a victim of excessive force, or the family that has been, you know, the victim of bigotry, or the kids that are being called out their name or isolated because of their skin color or the texture of their hair. Again, the church has to be able to walk with people through all of everything that they're living through. If we can get that right, yeah, and partner with mental health professionals, yes, you know what I mean? So again, it's about creating a community, you know, a body where people can really get their needs met. And unfortunately, in all of this civil unrest, if the church is silent, if we're mute, we're losing our witness. Yes. You know what I'm saying? And that's another thing. So we talk about working on the inside, we talk about working on the outside. The other thing is we need to have a prophetic posture where we can speak truth to power. You know what I mean? So again, as the body of Christ, we should be able to hold leaders to an ethical standard. I mean, and so that our prophetic witness, it can't be sacrificed or sabotaged by any of our own racial mess. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, those are 3 practical things that we should be doing, where, again, we should be that light on the hill, you know, that society is looking to, like, wow, you know what? They're getting it right. They're getting it right.
And here's a challenge. The challenge is that for years, so many people have done so many, quote unquote, wrong, bad, negative things in the name of God. Right? We look at, for example, David Koresh, right? Who was American cult leader. We know that he set foot in Waco and blew it all up and all the followers, etc. Right? But he was doing it in the name of God, right? Because he said God gave him this vision to do this, right? So then something else that struck me, and I think Pastor Rufus, I've shared this with you before, is that even like the Southern Baptist Convention, study shows it's the largest Protestant denomination in the United States. And it came about in 1845, but just now, 173 plus years later, they're just now facing slaveholding. This is the Southern Baptist Convention. And 170 plus years, they're just now confronting the issues of them holding slaves and all of the racial inequities that they have spread through all of these years. Now, here's something I learned in my studies that I put this, I don't know if it was in one of my systematic classes or probably my I can't remember what class it was last term or last semester. But one of the things I wrote in the essay was that or my discussion, that it's very hard for me to accept it, knowing that they're still advocating for the people who oppress blacks. So here they are in the name of God, doing the different conventions, seminars, churches, whatever they're doing, but they're still advocating for the people who are oppressing blacks. But you say you want forgiveness from it, but I'm doing it in the name of God. And so when we're supposed to be setting the standard, the challenge that I see is that there's no national standard or universal standard. Well, we have it, we don't follow it. A universal standard, what it means to be a follower of Christ, right? We don't emphasize the national or the global standard. When we talk about police brutality, same thing in segment 1, is that there's no national standard for training. Training here is different than it is in Dallas, different than it is in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Everything is so different. So the standard that we must follow is the example of Christ, not making up our own, right? And so if we get on the same page of emphasizing that the standard that we must follow is Christ and follow that, not make cults, conventions, or organizations that say this is our doctrine or ideology, which are another total different conversations, then I think that we can be on the same page when it comes to really utilizing the church to help eradicate racial bias in society. Right? But each church, each denomination needs to follow one principle that can help guide us to be that light up on the hill. But when there's people who are seeing us all different, all doing different things, believing different ways, then how can we be an example? To me, that's a challenge that we have, especially in the Black community. You go drive up Crenshaw right now, there's 4, 5, 6 different churches, all doing different things. At what point will we come together as one to serve for one common good? And we know that is to draw people in, to preach the gospel. Any theology seminary class will tell you that. It's to make the gospel known. So I'll get off of that, but I'll go into to Jerica here. And a question that I have for you, and to really echo what Pastor Rufus has said tonight as well, is that the church has a responsibility to be at the forefront, right? Jasmia says that educators, Black educators, need to rally around white educators to really take them and lead them and educate them on the covert. But even as affluent Black folks, we talked about this in segment 2 as well. As affluent Black folks, we have a responsibility to really, those who may not experience the mental traumas that others may have in underserved communities. Jasmia said it, there's past traumas that's feeding into this. What responsibility do we, as those who may be considered to have it all together, affluent, what role do we have to help really preach the message to those in the Black community that we should take our mental health seriously and that we should seek help when necessary? What role do we have?
I
think to normalize it. I think to be more transparent and vulnerable. Like I have a therapist. I think everybody should really have a therapist, especially
A therapist has a therapist, y'all.
Yeah.
That's good.
Like how am I expected to hold the space for everybody else, my family and my friends? Like who holds the space for me? And so I think it's important to make sure that everyone normalize mental health and normalize it where it's not taboo, normalize it where it's not trendy, but really normalize it where we get to the point where it's like, oh girl, what did your therapist say? Oh girl, my therapist too. Like we need to normalize it. Right now, it's kind of getting there, but there is still a lot of hesitation when it comes to going. But most affluent Black people have a therapist or a psychologist or a psychiatrist. They have those on hand because there is a lot that we deal with. So not only do we deal with work issues, family issues, intergenerational trauma, then on top of all of that, we have to deal with racial injustices. And then seeing our Black brothers and sisters killed every day on social media, on the television as well. I tell people all the time, you have to be really mindful of your mental stability. Someone told me yesterday, they was like, oh, Jerica, I was so sad. I was crying today. I said, why? He said, because of Jacob Blake. You know, Jacob Blake was in a situation where he's trying to help others, you know, break up a civil dispute. The cops arrive. He's like, oh, great. Like, you know, let me go on about my Mary Ray. And they end up shooting him 7 times in the back.
Paralyzing me.
And so someone else was like, well, did you watch it? I said, no. I'm not at the ability. I don't think anyone should be at the ability to continue to watch injustices like that every day. It dehumanizes us. It dehumanizes us. So I think it's important to recognize, hey, I understand why you're sad. You know, you watched that. That could have been your brother. That could have been your husband. That could have been, you know, your friend. Imagine watching that over and over again. And not only that, so that dehumanizes us, but it makes the world that isn't Black feel like, and I'm not saying this is everyone, but it can be perceived as it normalizes the killing.
Yes.
And so you get to the point where it's like, oh man, here it is again. You know, we're tired, but it's okay to find solitude into a mental health professional, like normalize it. So that would be my suggestion, to normalize it and really be mindful of what you feed your mind or what you feed your spirit.
To your point, Pastor Rufus, I believe in your Facebook comment that you posted last eve, it was more of, I don't know if you use the term numb, but it's easy for you to desensitize yourself. Because like you said, that becomes normal. You know, seeing, oh, there goes another one. Yeah. We see somebody thrown on the hood. Yep, there go another one. Wonder what he did. So it's to your point, Jerica, it's like we have to, for those of us who seek counseling, seek help in any shape, form, or fashion, we must normalize that for folks to really see that it's okay. You know, it's like, forget the stigma of saying, I'm crazy. Yeah, I'm crazy, but I overcame it. Right? I was crazy enough to seek the help that was needed before I end up doing something I didn't want to do.
I think we should get rid of the word crazy.
Yeah.
That has a very negative connotation. We need to really be able to identify, I'm sad, I'm mad, I'm angry, I'm frustrated. You know, let's identify the emotions and then go to someone that can help us and tell them so they can give us the coping mechanisms that we need in order to get through it. But if we continue to say, oh, I'm crazy, then your subconscious, and it puts you into a category. We have dealt with a lot as Black people.
Yes.
If anything, we're resilient. We are trying to make sure that we can move past this systemic racism that we have to deal with every day in order to continue to live our everyday lives, in order to take care of our families, our husbands, our wives, our kids, you know what I mean? Every day. Yeah. So I think we also have to get rid of that.
Get rid of the word crazy. Get rid of the word crazy. Yeah. There's a responsibility. And I believe too, even to your point, Jerica, just now, the responsibility of helping folks to understand that how certain words, right? Certain words such as crazy, how I use the word all the time, crazy. Jasmine knows this at home. Like, that's crazy, or I am going crazy. But it automatically, psychologically puts us into a box, you know, whether that's just amongst ourselves internally or amongst a group of peers.
Right.
And then they have room to keep us there, right? Because we have made the decision to teach them that we're crazy. You know, it puts us into that box. So these are again, yes, conversations that are needed for the Black community. But the way that we round this out tonight is really showing how each of these topics and or professions or duties or responsibilities or ministries feed into the Black community and how it can either affect us negatively or affect us positively. But we have to make that choice. We have to make that choice. I'm going to end it out now, but please, Jasmia, Pastor Rufus, Jerica, please share a final comment that you would like to leave with our viewers and our listeners tonight. Jasmia, let's start with you, please.
Thank you for this platform and for the ability to share with those who tuned in, those who will watch this later. But I think that educators or education in general has, specifically in the urban communities or those communities that have serviced Black and Latinx students, have often been negatively stigmatized with so many different ills of the society, where it feels as though there's no hope. It feels as though what else can we do? And there's a lot more that we can do. There's a lot more that our community officials can step up and do, our community activists can step up to do, as well as our community members. So we need all stakeholders all on deck to recognize the current situation that we are in, that we have never faced before. And that's going to cause significant generational setbacks if we are not intentional with this time. So I'm charging everybody who knows the educator, who is touched by education, to please step up and just ask, what can I do? Because everybody has a role in this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. Important question to ask. What can I do? What can I do? That's a question that everybody needs to ask themselves, is what can I do? What can I do? Thank you very much, Jasmine. We really appreciate it. Jerica, please.
Okay. I think that we first have to recognize what we're feeling within ourselves and practice self-care. And what is self-care? That's meditating, that can be praying, that can be running. I think we should do that. Breaking toxic relationships, setting boundaries, and if nothing else, just really, really knowing that it is okay to go to therapy. I think we should talk about it with our friends, our family. And I also think that we should just be honest with ourselves and just being mindful of what we feed our spirit. Because once your mind is gone, it affects your health and everything else. There's studies that talk about that as well. So that would be my last thoughts. And thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you very much. Thank you. Pastor Rufus.
Well, let me thank you, Matthew, for inviting me to be a part of this wonderful presentation and this panel. And, you know, I feel like what you've done tonight, it illustrates what's needed, you know, and that's really a collaboration around our community's best and brightest, so that we as a whole can continue to grow and with one another. You know, I don't think it's strange that, you know, we could have only focused the conversation on law enforcement and excessive force, and that surely deserves our attention, our outcries, and our resources. But that is one piece of a bigger puzzle. You know, so you know, my closing thought is just a reminder that as we forge forward as a people, that we do so united and that we collaborate across you know, these different segments, you know, of our community, and not only within the Black community, but some other people groups, because again, that is how we grow and that's how we overcome, is when we do reach across the aisle. Not to sound like a politician, but there's some truth in that.
Yes.
So kudos to you, sir.
Thank you. Kudos to everybody. What a phenomenal night it has been for all of us here Of course, we're at All In Co-working of Inglewood here in Inglewood, California, doing this as safe as possible with all of our panelists, here in the room. And so as I begin to close out tonight, I really want for everybody to pay close attention to how I begin to round out this night. And how I begin to round out this night is with 2 steps. The first step is take what resonated with you the most and figure out a way how you can immediately apply that to your life. What that means is if it's seeking help, meaning a therapist, maybe there's some things in your mind that you simply cannot unclog. So therefore, maybe there's a therapist that can help you. I want you to normalize that tonight. And I want you to really identify who the person is that can help you to navigate, for some, a treacherous path that may be in front of you. Don't be afraid to seek that help. The second thing is I want you to take something else that has resonated so well with you and figure out who it is that you can connect with to create some type of an effort or initiative to combat racial bias, racial inequities, or racial injustices. Maybe it's partnering with an organization. Maybe it's just simply identifying someone in the community who's already doing it, but maybe they're missing your input. Maybe they're missing a thought that you can give, something that I value that Pastor Rufus has said in his Bible study one time. You can be so quiet for so long, but while you're quiet, be praying for wisdom so that when you speak, it's the wisdom of God that comes out. I don't want to sound churchy, but for those who are watching can understand. I've seen the comments, so you can vibe with the spiritual talk. But I want you to take some time to really understand what your voice can do for the progression of the Black community. I don't know what that means for you. So if you're watching now or you'll watch this later, really take hold of the conversations that have been happening for the past 3.5 hours. They have not been in vain. The information that has been shared can truly change the trajectory of the Black community. But here's the kicker: if you let it. So choose this night for it to be the best night that sets up the rest of your life. My name is Matthew Newman here at All In Co-working of Inglewood in Inglewood, California. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Conversation is needed for the Black community.